Okay, I think we'll start now. So, distinguished speakers, respected participants, I'm Vivek Dhostapa, Program Coordinator and Research Associate here at the Nepal Institute for International Cooperation and Engagement. In short, like to call it NICE. I will start by briefly introducing NICE. NICE is an independent, apolitical, and non-partisan think tank. And here at NICE, we believe in freedom, democracy, and a world free from conflict. This year, it is my pleasure to say that it is the 10th year anniversary of the establishment of NICE, and since then we have come a long way. NICE has been able to put Nepal quite visibly on the world map for academicians, policymakers, universities, and the think tank communities across the world. We are currently engaging with around 25,000 scholars from all around the world, including those less engaged with Nepal. For example, Ukraine, Romania, Macedonia, Poland, Argentina, the Philippines, Indonesia, Estonia, and a lot more. And a lot of friends will be joining us here today in this webinar as well. And we have MOUs and engagements with more than 95 institutions from around 55 countries. So we are able to connect with the Nepali diaspora, students, and academicians around the world. And we have also been able to create a huge database and IR literature on Nepal with published books, special reports, and thousands of commentaries on our website sent by scholars all around the world. NICE has also encouraged several institutions in Nepal. Several institutions reach out to us for the support, like to invite renowned experts, and they also contact us for partnership. NICE is also established as the regional center or the nodal head for the Indo-Pacific affairs of Millennium Project, South Asia Foresight Network. NICE also works on niche issues for Nepal, like the issues of nuclear weapons and its security. So it is my pleasure to welcome you all to this very special webinar on how does the world view balanced leadership in Nepal. As you are all aware, the youths of Nepal took to the streets on September 8th and 9 of 2025. It was labeled as the Gen Z movement in Nepal. This movement managed to overthrow not just the then government, but it rapidly altered the political landscape of Nepal by pushing out the old and embracing the new, which we saw in the March elections. In this context, in Kathmandu, there is a lot of deliberation going on how this government will look at other countries in terms of foreign policy and diplomacy. But there was very less discussion on how other countries are looking at this government. So keeping this in mind, we at NICE, we decided we thought it would be a good idea to bring together diplomats, policymakers, scholars, and experts from all around the world to get to know how the world is looking at Prime Minister Balinsa's government. So, without taking any more of your time, I think we will start the webinar for today. I would like to introduce our first speaker for today. We'll start with Dr. Shahab Enam Khan, who is the Executive Director of Bangladesh Center for Indo-Pacific Affairs in Bangladesh. So, Doctor, I hand over the floor to you. Please try to make your remarks in 5 to 7 minutes.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Vivek. It's a pleasure to be here. I've been closely observing the growth of NICE, and I'm very impressed the way NICE has unfolded itself over the past few years. And this is, I think, a very important topic because I think I come from Bangladesh, which makes me to think about the Nepali experience from a much more deeper perspective. Now, even if you look at from a very Bangladesh perspective, or perhaps even if you see it from a greater South Asian perspective, I think Nepal is the third resort that has really brought out a massive structural change, not only in Nepal itself, but overall South Asian structure of politics. Even if you look at 2022, Sri Lankans having this Argalaya, which made the Rajapaksa to collapse. That was largely by the youth. That was coupled with economic collapse for sure. And then subsequently in 2024, we have seen in Bangladesh the July Revolution, which ended Sheikh Hasina's 15 years of rule. And then, of course, 2025, Nepal's Zenzi uprising ousted the Sharma Oli within 72 hours. Now, these movements are deeply rooted in their own national histories, but definitely tied together by a generation which has been refusing to accept broken promises and visibly learning from each other. Now, that is one important issue for each other. And then even if you look at whether these are isolated, of course not. These are not isolated in a sense. If you look at the phenomena with their local triggers, they're pretty much same. The deposed leaders are all over 70. Rajapaksa was 74, Sheikh Hasina was 76, Oli was 73. And that means that whole spectrum of generation, or what I would call grandparents' generation, became an unbearable structural condition for a digitally native demographic. And I think that was very important to understand. What makes Nepal the most consequential case in any case is that it produced, among all these three examples, the cleanest democratic resolution. And Sri Lanka took 2 years, and a Marxist-leaning president came to power to stabilize. Bangladesh took 1.5 years through Yunus's interim government, which allowed BNP to come. And of course, the Nepal one is the fastest one, and where you see that Karki interim government actually delivered within 6 months of time. And it brought the first single party parliamentary majority in Nepal since 1999. And this most decisive electoral verdict since the country's first election in 1959. And that means this particular result is consequential to show that the digital native really wants a very different ecosystem in their politics. Now, what it means there are fundamental issues that we have to be very careful about. I mean, trigger factors. Now, the biggest challenge for Balen Shah would essentially be to return to economic stability. And of course, when you talk about economic stability, it requires much more of a robust foreign policy, international relations compared to the time that the earlier governments had. Now we have entered into a very transactional multipolarity, and I'm using the term transactional multipolarity for obvious reason. If you look at the way the international politics is unfolding, Buland Shah has come to power at the age of 35 when this entire multipolarity is going through a massive revision. And that revision is certainly a challenge for a very young parliament that has come to power. The second important issue is, I think, the mandate. And I think what makes me super impressed is that Shah's government has got almost, I think, 182 of 275 lower house seats. I mean, that has marginalized Nepali Congress like anything. I mean, that is also a clear case of generational repudiation of the parties that have dominated Nepal's politics for 2 decades. Now, Balanit himself has roughly got more than 70,000 votes, which is highest in Nepal's history, electoral history too. But again, this also tells that the public expectation on Shah will be much more stronger than ever, because this number is not only a number of vote, it is also an issue of massive expectation from the mass. Shah comes with a very strong personal integrity. I mean, in a system saturated with corruption scandals, no credible accusations against Balen himself have surfaced. I mean, in a way that his clean record has become a major factor in consolidating his power. But how far this power will be consolidated and whether his party will be able to maneuver through the temptation of corruption and so on is something to be seen in the coming months. And then, of course, symbolic legitimacy has a consequence for the South Asian politics, to be honest. I mean, he's the youngest serving head of government in the world at the moment. And he's a rapper who has turned into prime minister, and he's the first independent to win Kathmandu's mayoralty. before national politics. And Time has recently included him in its 100 most influential people list alongside figures like Donald Trump and President Xi Jinping. So that means his symbolic legitimacy also comes with a greater expectation from the regional politicians too. So that means his first cabinet is how they're going to execute their 100-point governance reform agenda is something that the South Asians will be monitoring over the coming months. But of course, he has dismissed Labour Minister Deepak Shah and accepted Home Minister Sudan Gurung's resignation within his first month, both over conflicts of interest for sure, but also this is a milestone that shows the South Asians that post-revolutionary governments can actually protect the aspiration that the public has always talked about in Nepal. Now, where are the weaknesses? And I think this is something I would be very interested in discuss because I think the first problem is that we haven't seen in a month into office from Mr. Shah that he has gone for a single press conference or addressed the nation as we see from Bangladesh. I mean, I might be wrong, I might be absolutely wrong, but his reliance over Facebook is one issue that has been flagged many times in many conversations that I came through. Now, for a leader whose mandate rests on participatory legitimacy, this distance is a structural risk. And I would warn that this structural risk can lead to some sort of confidence, lack of confidence. Then, of course, his relationship with India, Bangladesh, China, Pakistan, and of course, United States will be another issue because this is largely related to the ideological vacuum. Now, when I mention ideological vacuum, it's not a negative way I'm saying that. But essentially, if you look at RSP lacks a very defined ideological base. I mean, unlike Nepali Congress, which is liberal democratic, or UML Maoist, who is left, or perhaps even RPP, which is a royalist institution. And I think an umbrella of disaffected can win elections, but sustaining a 5-year governing program will be harder with the lack of ideology. And perhaps this will also redefine Nepal's relationship with the ideological states, particularly China and obviously the United States, which values democracy and so on. So I think that ideological vacuum I must raise as a red flag. And that means this whole the end of genetocracy as a stable equilibrium is very much there. But at the same time, as I mentioned, that the growing disconnect can challenge the legitimacy at some point of time if it is remaining unchecked. Now, my final point when Bangladesh sees Nepal, I think the first signal that we get is the symbolic equalization. And what I mean by symbolic equalization is that Balen has actually replaced traditional one-on-one bilateral meetings with a collective meetings. And that's what we have been reading in the newspaper, and which is a deliberate flattening of diplomatic hierarchy, which is very new. And we should read this as Nepal refusing to perform deference to any single capital. The second issue is there is a historical echo, and I think this is very important. And I think his idea of balanced and independent Nepal or Nepali foreign policy echoes King Birendra's 1970s zone of peace proposal, and which is in which the US and China is a very important factor. But obviously, this balanced and independent approach has been heavily appreciated by both Washington and Beijing, but I'm not very sure whether Delhi still sees it from a very neutral point of view or an attempt to sleep out of mutual security arrangements. So that means Nepal's neutrality reflects is structural, not novel for sure. And I think Balen is reactivating an older national strategy, which I think suits the new kind of multipolarity that we're seeing. There is, of course, I think the recalibration with India is going to be another clean issue. I mean, clean in a sense is a major issue for Kathmandu, because Modi has already invited Balen to Delhi for a state visit, and RSP's that slogan "Aapki Baar Balen Sarkar" campaign also signals kind of a Modi callback. However, gestural intimacy without ideological alignment is something that we are now seeing there. Now, that means Balen is operationalizing transactionality or transactional multipolarity that I always talk about, because the world where we live in, everything has to be transactional, unfortunately. And the post-liberal world order is another critical issue, particularly what is happening in the West Asia at the moment. So what it means that his responses so far is not a civilizational rhetoric like what you get to hear in Delhi, or kind of a ideological,
I'm sorry to
like
interrupt, Dr.
Oli.
Khan, but
I'll
can you
take
continue?
1 minute and wrap it up, or
Thank you.
perhaps the Oli government ideological tilt, or perhaps even security alignment, which you used to see when Nepali Congress was there, leaning towards Delhi. So I think every great power is treated as a transactional counterparty in this whole ecosystem of foreign policy as we read. We might be, it is too early to really say that this reading is a perfect reading, or reading is going to be sustainable reading, but for sure, that kind of reading that we get from Bangladesh. And the last point that I think what I would say, that if we look from a very revolutionary point of view, these particular Gen Z revolutions are not essentially a temporary one. This is going to be the residue of these movements is going to be there for a long, long time. And I think what I would strongly suggest that Nepal should continue to have a principled foreign policy, not opportunistic for sure. And they should continue to maintain multipolarity, and, of course, not playing powers off each other for short-term gain, but maintaining sovereign decision space across a long horizon that the young generation aspires to see. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Khan. I would like to quickly apologize to all our speakers and our participants because we have limited time. I would pay to hear all our distinguished speakers for hours, but we have a serious time crunch. And then due to the limit of participations in Zoom, we are at limit. So if there is anybody you would like to suggest to join the Zoom meeting, maybe you can join through our Facebook Live. I'll share the link below. Next, we have Dr. Rob York. Dr. Rob York is the Director for Regional Affairs of Pacific Forum USA. So, Dr. York, could you kindly make your remarks in 5 to 7 minutes?
Yes, sir, I can. Thank you once again for this invitation to participate in this event and to share our thoughts from our country's perspectives on this political shakeup that has taken place in Nepal. I want to start by stating that while I am here to talk about how the U.S. views the Balen Shah government, I do not represent the Trump administration or any of its predecessors, and my views are the product of long-time observance of U.S. government foreign policy rather than an insider's account of the Trump government. In February, I participated in the Kantapur conclave in Kathmandu, where I was asked to talk about the U.S. perspective on Nepal, and I said at the time that the Trump administration probably did not have Nepal on its radar, but urged everyone in the country to see that as a positive development. Countries that get this administration's attention tend to pay a price in the form of high tariffs and possibly worse outcomes. I know that Nepal did face 10% tariffs, but compare that to the 50% that India was threatened with at one point, or that Lesotho, a small landlocked country in Africa, heavily dependent on its textile exports, initially received as well. Both of those countries eventually were able to negotiate their tariff rates down, at best However, that would have prompted a time-consuming set of negotiations to bring the rate to a reasonable level. So, as of now, my view of how the Trump administration views Nepal has not really changed over the last 3 months. In fact, I would say the administration's decision to commit itself to what it calls its excursion in Iran further confirms the view that its priorities are elsewhere. The administration has not completely inverted former U.S. relationships in that it still treats China and Russia as strategic competitors and has been more aggressive in undermining long-term adversaries in Iran and Venezuela that are not regarded as peer competitors. It has also enjoyed relatively stable relations with South Korea and Japan, despite imposing tariffs on them as well. It has had tense relations, however, with longtime allies such as those in Europe and Canada, and this administration has been most comfortable, I would say, with governments that seem to explicitly commit to furthering its own agenda. El Salvador is a prime example of a beneficiary, as it has assisted the U.S. on carrying out its immigration policies. Israel and Argentina are other examples for helping to further administration aims in their respective regions. Until recently, Hungary was a country that the administration not only supported, but was willing to stake political capital on. Since that degree of alignment was unlikely always for Nepal, it would probably be best to remain under the radar. But we then have the question of how your mid-level U.S. government functionaries see the Balen government, such as the Bureau of South and Central Asian Affairs at the U.S. State Department. The perspectives of individuals there might matter less in the near term than, say, your cabinet officials within the Trump administration, but they can help ensure a degree of policy consistency and advise this administration and its successors on how it approaches Nepal, especially should the country and the region find themselves in the administration's radar. From the perspective of South Asia watchers in the U.S. government bureaucracy and outside, the key word is likely stability. The Gen Z protests from last year were a sign that stability was under threat and that the country's longtime governance by leaders whom the youth did not feel represented them had reached the point of being considered intolerable. The emergence of a fresh face, such as Balen, who has emerged as a symbol of the youth's desire for change, could potentially prove a positive influence. Youth policies are especially important in Nepal, which has a median age between 25 and 26, which is considerably lower than ours in the United States or in China's, and a few years lower than in India and most of your neighbors in South Asia, excluding Pakistan and Afghanistan. So far, it appears he is determined to challenge entrenched interests, which could conceivably point toward policy that encourages change and undermines the nepotism that helped drive youth discontent. But his dispute with, for example, the central government in 2023 when he was the mayor, the dispute involving his wife and a security check, from the perspective of the U.S. government may be somewhat alarming as it revealed a confrontational, some might even say inflammatory approach to settling disputes. This may not be consistent with stability. That said, the results of that incident and the Gen Z protests suggest that he better understood the public mood than the central government of the time. His demolition drive as mayor likewise shows a willingness to break with convention that might be necessary in a country crying out for change, but I will simply note that he also faced criticism on procedural grounds for that and a perceived lack of concern for those affected by the demolitions. I don't feel it's appropriate for me to say whether those criticisms are more valid than Prime Minister Balen's point of view, as my institution's approach is generally to avoid taking sides or the perception of taking sides in the domestic political disputes in our partner countries' democracies. I will simply note that the U.S. government's perspective will be that governing for the long term is in the best interest of stability, not governing for the sake of controlling the headlines. As far as foreign relations go, the priority of the U.S. toward Nepal and elsewhere would be to see the limitation on the People's Republic of China's influence. It is the people, it is the position of the U.S. across administrations that the PRC is a revisionist power that seeks to expand its own influence at the U.S.'s expense, and that this is also not in the best interests of our partners. It is my understanding that Prime Minister Balen has taken an even-handed approach thus far, which seeks to treat the PRC and India as equals, and we acknowledge that from the perspective of Nepal, this approach makes some sense. Even though our sympathies are more likely to lie with India, we are not a smaller country in India's sphere of influence. Therefore, an approach that engages both and seeks to keep either from outsized influence has a certain logic to it. All in all, we wish the Balen government well. A truly representative government that serves the country's youth is in its long-term interests, as is an equidistant foreign policy. While you're not likely to see a lot of high-level statements out of the Trump administration on Nepal, there are a lot of Americans working in official and non-official capacities who care strongly about Nepal and its future and who want to see it prosper. I would encourage further engagement with civil society organizations such as mine and others interested in Indo-Pacific affairs, the Nepali diaspora in America, as well as the U.S. State Department and Congress. Historically, the U.S. president's party tends to do poorly in midterm elections. That is the anticipated outcome this fall, at which point his capacity to impose his will on our foreign relations will take a significant hit, and other actors will take on a larger role. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much, Doctor, for your remarks. Now, I would like to go on to Professor Dr. Chang Jadum. He is the professor of Fudan University, China. So, Professor Chang, would you like to go?
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and also thanks nice invitation for giving me the chance to say something about Chinese perspective on Nepal's new governments. So firstly, I want to say, generally, Chinese media reported on Nepal's recent events since last year, many in a very neutral and pragmatic manner. During last year's Generation Z protest, the main outlets such as Global Times, such as Xinhua news agencies, they many framed the events as a domestic governance crisis, caused by high level unemployment, corruption, and social injustice, and as these kind of factors. So after the March of this year's election, the tone turned much more positive. Following RSP's landslide victory and Balen's rise. So all this was hailed as symbols of youth power and a national change. So media usually highlighted his journey as the 19th rap premier and admired very much about his anti-corruption record. So generally, I think Chinese media constantly supports stability in Nepal and supports practical cooperation between Nepal and China. So about Chinese officials, so I think both Chinese officials and the public view Nepal's new government with a very pragmatic friendship. So policymakers welcomed Balen's inauguration on March 27 this year. You can see Foreign Ministry congratulated him, reaffirmed support for Nepal's sovereignty and stability, and also China side also pledged a deeper BRI cooperation and managing infrastructure and economic developments. So the value Nepal's continued adherence to the one China principle and the border issues. So the public reacted much more positive, I think. The 19th rap premier is a very popular label in China. This means a good word. And the Chinese young generation admired very much about the Balen's 19th rap premier. They admired very much about this. And the Chinese also admire Balen's anti-corruption image and the youth leadership very much. So I think generally people in China hope new governments brings stability and both tourism and trade between China and Nepal. So generally, I think China, from official to the republic, and sees the new government as a positive chance and supports friendly, mutually beneficial cooperation between two countries. So about China's public perception on Barry himself, many Chinese, including specifically for netizens, young people online, they hold a very highly positive view of PM Barry. And just like I mentioned, and the Chinese youth like to call him the 90s rock premier or internet celebrity Meyer. Is all good news, all good terms in Chinese online society. So they admire his unique background and his unique slogan during election. So his landslide victory in China is seen as a Generation Z revolution success and a model of youth counterattack. So the public appreciates very much about his outspoken style and see his rise as a symbol of political renewal. So many Chinese draw parallels with domestic issues, such as in China. We have a similar phenomenon and similar issues. So generally, and PM Barry is viewed as a fresh, hopeful figure and who can bring positive change and strengthen China-Nepal relationship in the future. So, and just personally, some points from myself. So first I think Nepal's new governments must follow a kind of strategy. I call it practical development plus transparent communication. Firstly, to strengthen ties with China, and I think we should have Nepalese government should create much better environments for some BRI projects, such as cross-border road, some power cooperation projects, and many issues like this, and should continue to expand people-to-people exchanges. So it's very important. So to improve Nepal's international image, I think Nepalese governments maybe can tell international society Nepal's Generation Z reform story through social medias and global forums. It's very important for new Nepalese image worldwide. This government is very, very different from past one. In the past, Nepalese government is mainly organized by very typical politicians and other parties. But this government is totally different. It's organized mainly by young people, young generation, and a lot of people without any official work experience. So it is important for our new Nepal's international image, because in the past, from Chinese, from many other countries' perspective, the traditional Nepalese government is a very old style, not much energy, not much capacity to change something. But this new government should have a totally new image. So generally, in conclusion, I think new government should focus on welfare issue, should turn domestic support into international recognition for mutual benefits, and should focus on economic development topics and people-to-people exchange topics. Okay, I'll stop here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor. Now, for our next speaker, I would like to invite Dr. Sutiorn Kingkaew. He is an academic practitioner from Thailand. So, sir, are you available to speak?
Hi, Vivek. Thank you, Ramon, for inviting me. It's my honor to speak about this topic, Thailand perspective on about political transformations and about future possible cooperations between us. I mean, I want to talk about a profound shift that is reshaping political landscape of our regions. I mean, definitely Gen Z is one thing that driving the change. in Thailand as well as in Nepal. I mean, we observed that in Thailand throughout the past decade. We have a younger generations voter coming to elections, and they're voting for change. They want to change. They want a new kind of government. They want to have a new kind of governance. They want to have a less corrupt or no corruption government. This is something that we are observing in many Asian countries. I mean, Nepal is one of a good example of what happened and what become reality. What people believe, what Gen Z want to see, and now it's becoming realities. You have a very young, energetic Prime Minister Balen, and I think we appreciate this kind of examples that I think lots of Thai Gen Z voters, Thai Gen Z, they're happy to see this happening. But I think we are expecting Balen to perform very well. I mean, I speak on behalf of Thai Gen Z. I mean, we want to see how Nepali governments move toward better in terms of less corruption, better development, more transparent, and so on, based on Gen Z government. This is something that lots of us are expecting and lots of us are looking forward to. If that happens, then there will be a lot of a new wave of Gen Z government across Asia. I believe that's gonna be one thing. I would term it as a youth quake for this, as a young people connect through digital network and inspired by solidarity movement, like in the past, a multi alliance, Taiwan, Hong Kong, Thailand, they have taken on the street and now onto the ballot box to demand transparency, to demand reform, to demand the break from the old political establishment. We have seen this, and we wish Nepal very well on this, and wish that Nepal can set a good example of how Gen Z will come into power and change the regimes, change the paradigm. And this is something that I still cautious, because it's not easy for the younger generation, Gen Z, to become successful in terms of running the country. Not easy. It's not. That's a lot of older generations, civil servants, government administrations, and so on, that they still have the old mindset. They still have the old way of doing things. And it's not like you become the government, Gen Z become the government, become prime minister, become the ministers. You can change everything overnight. It's not easy that way. It's not like that. And I believe that the experiment in Nepal will shed light onto many other Asian countries on how we should evolve in terms of younger generation taking into government, shaping the way that the government should run, and so on. This is something that I think we will wait and see, and we hope, we wish Nepal the best for this experiment. And for younger generation in Thailand and for Thai media, I think we portray this as just not just a political phenomena, but a cultural phenomena, symbol of ultimate disruptions of the status quo. Balen government is an embodiment of the anti-corruption drive and the demand for pragmatic, result-oriented governance that young people across Asia are trying to have or trying for. This transition is This transition from a rapper singing about urban hardships to the prime minister of a nation is viewed as a powerful narrative of hope. And we hope that will become effective government and will become an example of many Asian countries to follow. Regarding Thailand, I mean, what truly stands out to us in Thailand is the outcome of the youth-led revolution in Nepal. Political stability for decades, Nepal, much like Thailand, we have a struggling government, we have a revolving door government. I mean, we have a short-lived government, political fragilities. But this Gen Z-driven government has achieved something remarkable in terms of stable government. We wish for that, and with a massive majority, I think, without any accidents, I believe this government will be able to stabilize the country and come up with lots of new policies that will drive Nepal to the next stage. This, I mean, perhaps this is something like blueprint for the rest of us in Asia and around the world. It challenges the narrative that young governments are inherently unstable or too inexperienced to govern effectively. This brings me to the broader context of our region, that the Bay of Bengal Initiative for Multinational Sectoral Technical and Economic Cooperation, or BIMSTEC. Thailand and Nepal we are vital members of this community. Thailand has taken an active role in promoting youth engagement within BIMSTEC, such as organizing the BIMSTEC Young Gen Forum and so on. Now, what the questions has become is how can this dynamic leadership in Nepal under Prime Minister Balen help improve and deepen Thai-Nepal relations? First, I think there's a tremendous opportunity to leverage the share demographic dividend. Both our nations have vibrant, tech-savvy youth populations. By fostering direct youth to youth and younger generation, younger entrepreneur to entrepreneur connection, we can build economic and cultural bridge that bypass traditional, slower, bureaucratic channels. Second, Prime Minister Balen's background in structural engineering and urban management align perfectly with potential areas of bilateral cooperation. Thailand has significant expertise in infrastructure development, tourist management, urban planning. A young, pragmatic leader in Kathmandu would prioritize tangible development over the analytical battles. This is an ideal partner for Thai investors and technical experts. We can move beyond the traditional ties based on Buddhist pilgrimage, tourism, and expand into smart city initiative, sustainable waste management, and digital economic partnerships. Finally, the shared experience of navigating complex political transition give our young leaders common ground, as both countries strive to balance traditional with modernization. A strong dialogue between the new generation of Thai parliamentarians and the SP-led government in Nepal would foster a unique diplomatic empathy. In conclusion, I think the Gen Z movement is no longer just a protest movement, but in place like Nepal, it's become a government now, and the challenge lie on what would be the next stage of the Gen Z movement in Asia and in any other country around the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. Now, for our next speaker, I would like to invite Dr. Sataru Nagao. He's a non-resident fellow at the Hudson Institute based in Japan. So, Dr. Nagao, would you like to go next?
Thank you very much. It is honor for me. Today's presentation is how the Japan see leaderships in Nepal. So Japan's interest, Japan's viewpoint towards government in Nepal is my talk. So that's why this is a key to understand the current government. And in this case, key point is Japan's national interest in Nepal. So indeed, the three things that matters. Firstly, China. Next one is geopolitical location of Nepal. And the third one is India. So first one, we talk about Japan focusing on China. That is the main viewpoint of Japanese. So that's why we focusing on China. But China is one of the biggest trading partners for Japan. But at the same time, China is a military threat for Japan. That is combination. And for example, China's activity in the sea around Senkaku Island increased just 12 Chinese ships just 12 times come in 1 year in 2011. But 2019, it has increased more than 1,097. So that is increasing threat perception. So that's why Japanese who stay in China has drastically changed. That number was 150,000 in 2012, but 2025, the 90,000. So 40% of the Japanese who stay in China has already left China. So this is very drastic change. So business is shrinking in this case, indeed. And in this case, so that's why the recent Barikatan exercises Japan is joining is one of the typical examples Japan tried to deal with China. Because Japan sent 1,400 troops in Philippines and conducted joint exercises with US, Philippines, other many countries, including Australia, other, etc., Canada, blah, blah, blah. And so that's why. But in this case, the important thing is Japan is bringing the long-range missile to Philippines with the US and Philippines. So what kind of things Japan want to do? It simply said Japan, Taiwan, Philippines line, so-called first island chain. This is the main point, and Japan try to stop the China's military expansion. That is what is happening in the Pacific side. So view from such kind of view. If the Nepalese government try to tilting toward China, of course, always Japan concerned about the Nepalese government policy. That could happen. That is what firstly we need to say. And geopolitical location of the Nepal, this is the second topic. But in this case, we need to remember Nepal is located between China and India. But view from the geography, Nepal-China border is mountain. But Nepal-India border is flat and open. So in this case, naturally, Nepal's economy rely on India. So that's why when we talk about Nepal and view from the geography, naturally, Nepal is tilting toward India. That is a natural thing. If the Nepal is try to cooperate with China, is unnatural view from the geography. And in case of the India-China border, Japan is focusing on what happened between India and China. China's increasing incursion has increased from 213 in 2011, but by the end of the 2010-2019, 663. So like the Senkaku Island, sea around Senkaku Island, China is increasing activity in the India-China border. That is a concerning point. So Nepal is located just side of the India-China border, and so that indeed Nepal itself is a frontline country in this case. So under such kind of situation, some Nepalese government in the past tried to cooperate with China. It's Japan's concern. So that is location. So thirdly, I need to say, rising India, Japan is focusing on. Japan want to create a cordial relation with both Nepal and India. And if Nepal's policy toward India is, simply said, the relation between Nepal and India is good, that is welcome. That is good news for Japan too. So, rising India, view from Japan, this is a counter power balancer against China. So that's why it's always Japan focusing on India. But at the same time, Japan know that there is a problem between Nepal and India too. Simply said, smaller powers do not rely too much on the bigger neighbors. That is true. That is understandable. So that's why if the Nepal want to diversify their diplomatic partner, Japan can say Nepal should choose Japan instead of China. Because Japan is pro-India, but Japan can understand the feeling of Nepalese. Indeed, Nepalese population in Japan is increasing, and this is welcome. In 2025, 270,000 Nepalese stay in Japan. Compared with 1 year ago, increased 40,000. Fifth largest foreigners group in Japan. So that's why, view from Japan, if the Nepalese come to Japan, this is a welcome move. Let's arrive, something like that. So, conclusion. What is Japan's interest in a new government in Nepal? Japan want the Nepal to resist expanding China's influence. Of course, this is. And a good relation with rising China, this is also. And if there is a problem between India and Nepal, Japan could be the friendly third choice for Nepal. And this is a good choice for both Nepal and India. So if the new government in Nepal is stable by supporting many people, no corruption, something like that, and take charge of the many things as a stable government, and cooperate with Japan, cooperate with India, but not cooperate with China, simply. So it will be welcome for Japan. That is Japan's viewpoint. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Nagao. Now I would like to move to our next speaker. Our next speaker is Petro Burkovski. He is the executive director of ILCO Kucherev Democratic Initiatives Foundation of Ukraine. So, sir, would you like to go next? Do we have a Dr. Petro Burkovski? So I think I've been, yeah, hello?
Hello, do you hear me?
Yes, please.
So thank you for invitation. That was really very, very nice.
Sir, can you kindly unmute yourself? You just accidentally muted. Yes.
Oh, okay. So thank you for invitation and for this opportunity to speak about the perception of the Nepal's new government in Ukraine. So on the request of Dr. Jaiswal, I just made a quantitative research using the machine learning tool, the tool powered by the artificial intelligence, which we for a decade use to analyze the influence of Russian media on the Ukrainian media environment. So this is a tool just to analyze the discourse and the content of the media. So what we do is that we decided to collect and to see how many times Nepal and Balendra himself as a political leader and then as a prime minister was mentioned by the Ukrainian media. So it's a kind of objective picture. I sent this file to Dr. Jaiswal. Unfortunately, I cannot share right now my screen, but after the event, it can be available to all of the who are interested. But in short, I want to share with some of the details. First of all, and this is the important finding and the conclusion, is that Nepal appears in the Ukrainian media in the context of broader region. First of all, it's a South Asia region and South Eastern Asian region. And their major sources of information about Nepal are the top international media and press agencies and information media companies like Reuters, Bloomberg, influential, first of all, Western media like Financial Times. So these are primary sources from which information about situation in Nepal comes to Ukraine. So basically, what our media do is that they republish the articles and opinions of the mainstream Western media. So therefore, if and maybe it's it's a tip for kind of countries like Ukraine and Nepal, small and medium powers, that if you want to be present in other parts of the world, you should pay very close attention and build ties with the major media holdings which cover you. So you need to have reporters who are specifically interested in the region and who knows what is going on in your country in order to make relevant coverage and to bring news to other parts of the world. That is very important for the image of the country. Secondly, and it's also the objective evaluation, is that there is a balance of negative and positive emotions in all the media coverage. And most of all, it's more about the participation, unfortunately, about participation of the citizens of Nepal in the Russian army. And that's where they're either taken prisoners or died in the battle in the Ukraine. So this is also how Nepal is covered in the media of Ukraine. And it's also known by the other government, and that there is a very strong condemnation on the side of Nepal's government of such Russian practices. But still, this is also what's shaped the perception of Nepal in Ukraine. And the third conclusion and third finding is that the coverage in Ukrainian language is much more favorable towards the Nepal than its coverage in the Russian language. And I'm speaking about the Ukrainian media. So therefore, it's very important to know that the Ukrainian language media sources are more objective and are more objective towards the coverage of what's going on in Nepal, and specifically about the figure of new Prime Minister of Nepal, Mr. Balen. So he's viewed by the mainstream media in Ukraine as a young leader, as an anti-corruption fighter, and a leader of a new generation which succeeded in winning over the old elites. So this resonates with the public opinion in Ukraine also, but still the coverage is not as big as it could be. So basically, these are major conclusions. So my wish is that, or maybe not a recommendation, but my wish is that Nepal may use its strongest point as a country which has a very good and strong record as a UN that nation that provides the United Nations with the peacekeeping forces, the first, and secondly, the country that where the new generation of politicians has come to power, and which tries to rebuild the country. This is a very positive what is perceived in Ukraine. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your time. Now I would like to go to Cynthia Petri. She is the former UN advisor to Nepal, and she is also happens to be a distinguished fellow at NICE. So, madam, are you here?
Namaste. Can you hear me?
Yes, please go ahead.
Thank you. Very happy to be part of this conversation. Malai Kushi like you. Before commenting on the election, I want to say a few words about why Nepal is fascinating from a French point of view. Most horizontal revolts, from Tunisia that triggered the Arab Spring revolts to Madagascar that was inspired by Nepal very recently, are taking place in former colonies, and many of them former French colonies. Commentators feel comfortable talking about them because they consider that they are familiar with the history and the institutions of these countries. Nepal was never colonized. Nepal has its own way of doing things. No one knows how Nepal works or what's going to happen next. The second thing is that France itself is a very centralized form of state of power and very top-down. There have been very few attempts to either organize or rebel horizontally. You might remember the Yellow Vest protests a few years ago. So we are looking for models on how to improve our political system and give a larger power for people's aspirations and participation in decision making. In that sense, Nepal is a very interesting experiment, one we can learn from. And thirdly, while everyone comments enthusiastically on the battle between two strongmen, former Prime Minister KP Oli and rapper 35 years old former mayor of Kathmandu Balen, or comment on the alliance between two unconventional young strongmen, Rabi Lamid Shan and Balen Shah, who embody the wind of change demanded by Gen Z, the most fascinating element in the story that no one has mentioned so far is what did another great leader, Madame Sushila Karki. No one on earth in the history of political transitions has pulled elections within 6 months while keeping the peace, saving democracy, and not running herself. Women are often the unsung heroes of crises and conflicts, and this case is an emblematic one. Beyond this extraordinary accomplishment, I would like to comment about what this might indicate more generally about the return of collective struggles. The end of the Cold War and the collapse of USSR marked the end of a struggle between two ideological blocs. The global ideological conflict was followed in the 1990s by a period of ethno-political conflicts, Aceh, Kosovo, Sudan, South Sudan, and then in the beginning of the 21st century, by an increased individualization of identity struggles, Black Lives Matter, transgender rights, Me Too movement. Nepal has experienced a similar pattern with ethno-political struggles in the 90s and then increasingly individualized struggles, teachers' trade unions, Dalit, women's rights, Tarai, same-sex wedding, all very real and legitimate aspirations. But when I arrived in Nepal to work as a UN advisor some 3 years ago, I observed that these struggles at times focused on mutually exclusive suffering, giving the impression of a fragmentation of the spirit of revolt, and that the energy and vision of collective struggles had been lost. So this Gen Z revolution in Nepal and in other countries that were inspired by Nepal is interesting because not only the format is horizontal, but also the aspirations are horizontal. The whole population cares about corruption, accountability, development, safe drinking water, state infrastructure, and services. After Gen Z physically kicked out the elderly, corrupt, all-male, high-caste political class on Badra 24, the whole population kicked them out a second time by the ballot on Falgun 21st. This is March 5, confirming this is not an elite-connected youth revolt, but a national revolution. At the same time, while the Gen Z generation mobilizes through horizontal movements and demands, it does not reject identity struggles, but rather integrates them, encompasses them. In Morocco, young people took to the streets to denounce the death of 8 women in childbirth for lack of hospital capacity, while the government was spending considerable amounts on building yet another stadium. In Nepal, Kenya, and Bangladesh, women participated in the uprising, and it was a female interim prime minister who succeeded in leading Nepal out of the crisis. This country also elected a transgender member of parliament and a 35-year-old prime minister who's a former rapper and does not belong to the upper Brahmin caste. The horizontal broad-based uprising does not erase identity-based demands, but integrates them into a new dynamic without making them exclusive. The first big lesson learned is the emergence of a generation that embraces intersectionality, that challenges kleptocratic and incompetent elites, at a time when young people were considered apolitical, selfish, and disconnected from the world. Thank you, Gen Z. And the second big lesson is that Nepal will always surprise us in a good way. Thank you.
Thank you so much, madam, for your very insightful remarks. Now, let me check. Do we have Dr. Wuk Cho?
Okay, thank you.
Yes, so Dr. Wuk Cho is from the Korea National Diplomatic Academy in Seoul. So, sir, please, you can make your remarks.
Thank you for a warm invitation to the very timely and very important webinar. And thank you for the invitation to Dr. Pramod Jaiswal and Jaiswal and then Liz. I would like to speak as a Korean political scientist, not representative to the Korean National Diplomat Academy and or the government of Korea. Looking at the Nepali recent democratic and political dynamics, I would like to share Korean media, how Korean media report and look at the recent political phenomena and dynamics in Nepal. Korean media and academia view Nepal's transformation not as a distant news item, but as a shared case or asset of the East Asian democracy. Especially Korea's interest in Nepali political dynamics is grounded in its own democratic journey. As you know, that we have three kind of important democratic journey in modern Korean history. In 1987, when we obtained democratization from the dictatorship to democracy, and 2016 and 17, we had first impeachment and a new government. And then very recently, 2024 and 2025 from the martial law, and then we had impeachment. These three kinds of the democratic journey of the South Korea actually is very closely linked with the recent Nepali democratic experience and political experience. So I'd like to share exactly how the Korean media read the September uprising last year, especially. For example, so-called Hanguk Ilbo actually conducted exclusive interview with 18-year-old activist Shashwat Lami Teherin. At that time, the activist Shashwat mentioned that Nepalis remember Korean youth holding candles to show the power of the peaceful resistance. Small sparks became an unstoppable wave of light. And also another liberal newspaper, Gyeongyang Shinmun, reported some kind of the pushback against the ideological framing of the Nepalese political transitions. Because at the time, some Korean conservative outlets framed the protest as an anti-China backlash, but from the interview with the Nepalese protesters, it says that this is not about the ideology. It's about the jobs, corruption, and the public services. That is a very important narrative. And therefore, actually, the Korean media broadly welcomed the September uprising last year as a new form of democratic experiment by a digital parliament. And now the Korean newspaper, not mostly, but often, some news media reported about the recent government change in Nepal, especially Balen government. And mostly the initial Korean media actually took the favorable view of the recent government change, especially the Gyeongyang Shinmun, actually the called Balanced government is a kind of a storm in Nepal's political history. So, and also the other, many other, the Korean newspaper highlighted his Kathmandu mayor record, actually mentioning waste management and healthcare and anti-corruption is mostly practical and the more political policy oriented his tasks and jobs during the Kathmandu period. And also the academic side, some of the academia, the expert mentioned that, and also compared Valencia to the Park Won-soon, former Seoul late mayor, as an independent civic mobilization figures. So this shows the Korean scholars are already domesticating the Nepal case through familiar Korean reference point. But there is some caveat or the alarm bell from Korean news media, especially the recent a very small political, event and crisis in Nepal is. So Korean media reported that the case of the Sudan Gurung, Homeland Minister, resigned within a month over the disclosed financial holdings and partnership with the businessman under money laundering investigations. And also just the days earlier, a labor minister, also Deepak Kumar was dismissed for nepotism and so on. So why this matter for Korean perspective? Because this is a rapid cooptation of reformers pattern that Korea of the history has observed repeatedly since 1987. So the movement leaders entering institutional politics are quickly absorbed into patronage structures. So, the reform and sustainable the democratic governance cannot be obtained in a day. It takes some more effort and more times to institutionalize reformist agenda and institutionalize the reformist governance. So that we can draw some lessons. That democracy is not finished by one victory. Every generation must defend it again. As you look at the Korea and 2024, and we had candlelight, we have Gen generations protest against martial law, and therefore we concluded the impeachment of the former president. So in that regard, so this is not a the generational phenomena. It is a evolution of the citizen political culture in the scare. So that is a very important connection between Nepal and Korea in terms of democratic and reformist sustainable development and later on. So that's my observation of the political change in Nepal. And I will stop here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Doctor, for your remarks. Now, I would like to invite His Excellency Ambassador Lulzim Peci. He is the Ambassador of the Republic of Kosovo to Bangladesh. Your Excellency, the
Yes,
floor is
please.
yours.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
So thank you so much, distinguished representatives of NICE, dear Professor Pramod, dear professors, excellencies, esteemed participants, ladies and gentlemen, and good afternoon. It's an honor to join you today for this very important webinar, and I wish to express my sincere appreciation to NICE for organizing this timely platform for dialogue and reflection. At the outset, allow me to convey the warm greetings on behalf of the Republic of Kosovo and people of Kosovo here from Dhaka, and our highest respect to the people of Nepal. Kosovo warmly congratulates Prime Minister Balendra Balenshah on his historic election, which reflects Nepal's vibrant, youth-driven democracy. We admire Nepal's democratic continuity and its younger generation. Like Nepal, Kosovo is a young democracy rebuilding trust in its institution. So analysts note that as two landlocked transition economies, Nepal and Kosovo share a logic of diversifying partnerships beyond traditional blocs. Kosovo holds Nepal in high regard as an important potential partner in South Asia, but official relations are still limited. To date, Nepal has still not formally recognized the Kosovo's independence, so bilateral ties remain informal. Kosovo respects Nepal's sovereign foreign policy. We note that similar countries initially hesitated, but later acknowledged Kosovo, so that once they understood our history, I think that they acknowledged this reality and then recognized our country. In the meantime, I would also like to mention my recent visit to Nepal. by the end of the last year or before the election, which was an encouraging step towards strengthening ties between our peoples. I'm encouraged by the collaboration between the civil society of Nepal and Kosovo. And then in today's world, these bridges are often the first step towards wider state-to-state cooperation. I personally emphasize on continuing to show Kosovo's goodwill. We have several, I will say, key hope and expectation for the new government. We hope Nepal will soon recognize Kosovo's independence. So with that one, also unlocking full diplomatic engagement. This will allow formal treaties and agreements. In the meantime, Kosovo sees Nepal as a friend and prospective partner, as we expect to strengthen people-to-people ties as a foundation for the future government-to-government cooperation. We welcome Nepal's stated intention to deepen ties with all countries based on trust and shared prosperity. In particular, Kosovo hopes the new government will look beyond the immediate neighborhood. Balen, the Prime Minister, has already signaled outreach to non-traditional partners. I think that also from our step, our Prime Minister Kurti also congratulated to the Prime Minister, so that could this include that the greater engagement between also Kosovo, Europe, and South Asian countries like Kosovo we are. Both nations, let me just explain about our similarities. Both nations have large diasporas and share social similarities. Kosovo's experience in mobilizing its diaspora for investment and nation building is something we are eager to share. Nepal and Kosovo can share from each other on protecting migrant workers, right, encouraging return migration and converting remittances into development capital. We also expect, of course, to foster cultural exchange, especially in education. Nepali students can participate on Kosovo's scholarship program, and tourists could visit also Kosovo's historic sites and mountains, while Kosovo athletes and academics could benefit from Nepal's expertise in high altitude and training. For us, it's important also this exchange between the youth and the university level. As during my visit, I visited a university of Kathmandu, and I had really good discussions, so that we are looking forward to deepening our relation in terms of education, which we think that it's one of the main important topics, or the main important pillar of our bilateral collaboration. Kosovo sees economic opportunities in cooperating with Nepal. For example, in labor market, Kosovo can have exchange in manpower and construction, hospitality, and manufacturing. A formal labor agreement could have or could allow Nepali worker to legally fill these gaps, while giving Nepalese migrants a stable destination, a stable remittances. That means this is somehow that we can really develop also into this fields. Likewise, Kosovo's growing ICT sector and the metal processing sectors can offer goods and services of interest to Nepal, and there is potential also to develop a small-scale trade corridor between our regions. So we are looking forward on our attempt to approach the new government and to try to settle avenues for this very important milestone between our two countries, so that we are looking forward in the future to deepen our collaboration with you, with the civil society and other institutions, and we will stay into this path. So thank you. This is from my side. Thank you for your attention, and looking forward if there is any kind of question to answer later on. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Excellency. Now, I think we will move on to our next speaker. We will move to Hazamin Fadli Robi, who is an assistant professor at the Universitas Islam Indonesia.
All right, thank you.
Kindly make your remarks in 5 to 7 minutes, Professor. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. So this will be a short remark. Greetings from Yogyakarta, Indonesia. So today I'd like to outline my speech, more focusing into the aspect of bilateral relations between Indonesia and Nepal, and how we can progress together as two emerging nations, especially during the Balen Shah era and 2026 and beyond. So I think that there are three aspects that we should remember when we are discussing about the potentials in Indonesia and Nepal relations. So the first thing is that Indonesia and Nepal currently is in the 62nd year of its relation, of its friendship, as both independent nation. The first thing is that we have committed both in agreeing that his non-alignment principle is the core of our foreign policy. And Nepal historic 2026 election, which resulted in the victory of Balen Shah, has ousted legacy coalition politics that has been left by previous parties and establishment, and replacing this with a single party, which has secured a supermajority in Nepalese parliament. And I think that this is a good sign for stability in the future years to come in Nepal, as this government would secure delivery of policy delivery and also ensuring digital governance as a way to be to secure accountability for Nepalese citizens. The second thing is that the opportunity would also come from the Gen Z political disruption, in which Gen Z is trying to create new opportunities to create a stable, vibrant bridge between Indonesia and Nepalese people that could further increase our bilateral social, political, and also economic engagement. And both nations is very much well known for its role in constructing non-alignment values and also normative frameworks, as we have known that Nepal has already adopted Panchashil principles back then in 1960s, and this also mirrors Indonesia's constitutional mandate that is to preserve world peace on the basis of freedom and social justice. And we should know that Nepal and Indonesia are both having their own slogan when it comes to illustrating their own foreign policy. When Nepal is using the term of the yam between two boulders, Indonesia is exactly using exactly similar term, that is the rowing between two reefs. And these similarities in non-alignment commitment has been solidified, particularly during the 1955 Asian African Conference, in which all Asian and African countries are trying to create their own blocs against the influence of the United States and also Soviet Union. So let me come to discuss about Prime Minister Balendra Shah. I think this is very not uncommon for a leader to have engineer and also mayor stepping up as a national leader, but it is quite uncommon to see someone as young as him to lead a nation, emerging nation as Nepal. And we see him as one of the ways in which Indonesia could collaborate together with Nepal in order to accelerate the economic development, particularly in the terms of tourism and also in terms of cultural engagement, as we have now seen an increase in the visitation made by Indonesian tourists and also visitation made by Nepalese tourists in Indonesia. So I think that noticing the characteristic of Balendra Shah as a prime minister and his agility and his commitment for a clean government, I think this is a good sign for improvement in bilateral relations between this country, and also not only between Indonesia and Nepal, but also between SAARC and also between Asian, as Kathmandu and Jakarta is both serving as the capital for the regional organization in both regions. So what we should do in order to accelerate this potential? So the first thing that we can do is to have a better trade momentum, in which Indonesia is one of Nepal's top historical trading partners, with now bilateral trade surging past $113 million. And also RSP, the party which is ruling in Nepal now, has removed significant barriers for the growth of domestic startup. And also I would like to say that Indonesia has mature tech ecosystem. We have Traveloka, we have Gojek, and this could serve as an ultimate blueprint in order to allow for Nepalese startup to also grow together with Indonesian with Indonesian industry, digital ecosystem. And we have also institutional framework, and I think it's high time for us to do more engagement, especially between ASEAN and SAARC. Obviously, Nepalese foreign minister and also Indonesian foreign minister could do joint conferences, joint meeting together in order to talk about potential regional collaboration, especially in capacity building and also doing a lot of joint venture activities in hydropower and digital banking. And one of the things that I would like to also focus on is the shared heritage. And one of the potential that we can talk together is, especially in terms of Indonesia and Nepalese cultural collaboration, is the shared heritage that is that should be focusing on leveraging deeply rooted Hindu-Buddhist heritage in order to drive mass religious tourism. In Nepal, we have Lumpini, and also in Indonesia, we have Magelang with Borobudur Temple. And through this joint collaboration and leveraging Buddhist heritage sites, we could achieve common target, that is to achieve 5 million global tourists connecting both Jakarta and also Kathmandu together. So what is the immediate next step for both Jakarta and Kathmandu? I think the first thing is should be focusing on elevating diplomatic presence, that is to upgrade the current consulate status in Kathmandu to be a full-fledged direct embassy in Kathmandu in order to match the RSP and also Prime Minister Balen's ambition to upgrade Nepalese diplomatic standing. The second thing is also finalizing the Garuda direct flight routes to Kathmandu through transit by transiting through Dhaka and also, or through Delhi. And the last part of it, the long-term one, would be to initiate collaborative efforts in advancing digital governance and also knowledge exchanges between startups in Indonesia and Nepal in order to allow for the growth of a e-government rollout scheme that has been promised by Balen Shah during his first 100-day program. So I think that is my point. I hope for further discussions in time to come. So thank you very much, and greetings from Indonesia.
Thank you, sir. Now I would like to move on to our next distinguished speaker. Now we have Ambassador Pankaj Saran. He is the convener of NatStrat India and the former Deputy National Security Advisor of India. So, Ambassador, are you here? You can look. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I hope you can hear me. It's a great pleasure to participate in this discussion, and I want to thank Pramod for inviting me. It's a very important stage in Nepal's political journey, and I'll just make a few remarks to reflect how we see the situation in Nepal today, or at least how NatStrat and I see it. Firstly, I think it is clear it's a fresh beginning from a political point of view for Nepal after the fall of the monarchy in 2006 and all the intervening period during which the people of Nepal and the political parties spent time trying to recreate and design a new political structure in the post-monarchy phase. So from that point of view, 2026 will be remembered as a new phase because a new generation of Nepalese political parties, public figures, and activists have come to office in a highly well-organized election in which there were lots of surprises, and the old guard seemed to have been relegated or pushed aside by the new guard, by the younger generation. And to this extent, this is a very consistent process after the Gen Z revolution of September 2025. So we should not underestimate the significance of seeing new faces in the parliament, new faces in the cabinet, and above all, of course, a very young Prime Minister. So I can imagine that there will be a lot of enthusiasm and expectation in Nepal for what the results have thrown up. And from that point of view, therefore, the task for the new government and also the new parliament is cut out, because the expectations of the young and of the people are very high. And let us face it that, like any other country in the world or in our region, because of external factors, external shocks, Nepal is also facing challenges, largely economic, but also social. And the question which everyone will be asking, I'm sure, is how can the new government and the new parliament help in mitigating these challenges? Um, Clearly, they arise from imported inflation, from the Iran war, from the Ukraine war, and a general destabilization in the global order. So, in the middle of all this, I would say that we have to lend all our support to the new government in Nepal. When it comes to India and what we should expect from the relationship between India and Nepal, and how should this relationship be structured, I think a few comments can be made. Number one, that in this election, what I have heard is that India was not really a factor in the election. The election was fought on issues relating to the well-being and the livelihood of the people of Nepal. And the question which was being asked by the voter was which party can help in the realization of the expectations and hopes of the voter, rather than any major foreign policy issues. So this is, from my point of view, a very welcome change. Secondly, as in the domestic, the same applies to foreign policy, that people are hoping that there will be a fresh start and a new start. And therefore, it is incumbent on both the governments of Nepal and India to quickly, because I think here timing is important, sit down together and discuss what can be the shape and the future of a redefined relationship between India and Nepal, and how the two countries can utilize this opportunity that has come to both take on fresh ideas, fresh projects, and be ambitious in their scope. And secondly, to also deal with lingering legacy issues that could not find resolution in the last few years. So this can form a two-part agenda where you have legacy issues, and the second is a fresh start, looking ahead with new ideas. My third point would be that given the nature of the results and the elections and the participation of the broad masses of the people, we should also encourage and never underestimate the role and the significance of people-to-people contacts between India and Nepal, and the relationship between the two countries and two societies goes well beyond the relationship between the two governments of the day. And therefore, events like this, or organizations like NICE or Indian think tanks, have a very important role to play in generating greater people-to-people contacts, exchanges, both at the student level, at the academic, at the media, at all levels, in fact, cultural, trade, business. We have had a good history of this, but I think we should be more ambitious and we should do more. Luckily for us, we have a very congenial travel arrangement between India and Nepal in terms of visas, in terms of road connectivity, in terms of air connectivity. So the basic conditions exist for facilitation of such exchanges. What we can do and what we should do is to lend support to make sure that there is a broad-based dialogue which is ongoing, which is continuous. And I would like to personally see more students in both directions, more trade, more ideas flowing between the borders, so that a young Nepal and also young India can shape their own future together. These are some of the ideas that strike me at this point in the early days of this new government. From an Indian point of view, I think we should give time for the new government to settle down, to decide how they want to deal with the problems they have, what kind of a policy they would like in terms of foreign affairs, how do they see India's role in the fulfillment of their national objectives. And what I feel is that India will be ready to participate in the new dispensation that has been elected. So these are some of the points. I have just noticed one comment about the trade imbalance, which is true. This is a structural problem. We have to think of ways in which India can import much more from Nepal, given the asymmetry in the size of the two economies, keeping in mind, of course, that India is a much larger economy. So we have the same problem of an imbalance, for example, in our own trade with China. So trade imbalance is a problem. We should deal with it while recognizing the realities of asymmetrical size, which we have inherited and we cannot change. But within these constraints, there is still a lot we can do together in terms of economic progress, not limited only to trade, but there are many other aspects of economic activity that go beyond trade that we can consider. So I really hope that the younger generation, which is today at the helm of affairs in Nepal, will come up with bolder ideas, and that there will be opportunities, more opportunities than before, for them to sit with their Indian counterparts and shape a new future. Because one lesson that we have learned in all the geopolitical disturbance of the last few years is that the countries of the region, whichever region they belong to, have to cooperate with each other. Animosity, hostility, suspicion is not going to lead to a better future. So we should take lessons away from what's happening in other parts of the world and decide and cultivate and create a condition in which we can actually work together for the benefit of both countries. There is a lot of positivity and a lot of potential in the relationship. And it is time for us to exploit this. Today, the geopolitical situation is such that countries are looking for new partners, searching for new opportunities driving their economic agenda very, very pointedly, focusedly, in a focused manner. So we should do the same. And I believe that it is possible that both Nepal and India can grow at the same rate of growth. If India is targeting a growth rate of 7-8% for the next 10 years, we should try and make sure that Nepal also grows at the same rate, if not higher. Because if Nepal is growing rapidly in a sustainable manner, taking care of its environment, that will be good not only for the people of Nepal, but for the regional situation in terms of stability and peace. So with these words, I would like to conclude my remarks. Just to say once again that I'm very happy that I got this opportunity to share some of my views. And I really sincerely hope that these kind of interactions will pave the way for more interaction. As far as I'm concerned, on behalf of my organization, NatStrat, I would like to extend an open invitation to any Nepali scholar or student who visits Delhi to invite them to our office for a discussion, for exchange of views. And we have at least in my organization, we have a completely open mind on all issues relating to India-Nepal relations. Once again, deep gratitude and thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador, for the offer and your remarks. It's always a pleasure to getting to hear you speak on Nepal-India relations. I feel like it's very fresh perspectives whenever you're giving your remarks. Now, I would like to invite Dr. Hebatallah Adam. She is the professor of Horizon University College in UAE. Professor, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be with all of you here today and to join this esteemed group of speakers from around the world to discuss on how the world sees Balen's leadership in Nepal. And I will share with you today my perspective as an Egyptian scholar. I'm Egyptian national and I'm UAE resident. I also worked in India for more than 7 years. And my area is international development. So what I will focus on is how the Middle East and the Egyptian media have engaged with this case of Mr. Balen's leadership in Nepal. So starting first, if we look at the major pan-Arab platforms such as Al Jazeera, Al Arabiya, and the Arab News, the general tone about the news coming from Nepal is it was analytical and more of attention was giving to this new leader in Nepal, young, and it's a kind of a leader coming from a non-traditional pathway into politics, and also someone who connects directly with the public, specifically with the youth there in Nepal, and also a figure who is associated with a kind of new forms of public and political engagement. And in my readings, I believe that the Middle East media does not frame the news that were coming from Nepal from a judgmental point of view, but rather as seeing it as an example of evolving leadership pattern globally. And it was actually very interesting example that require more of studies in future. Also, here, what I would like to emphasize is why this story of the new leader, young leader in Nepal resonates within the Middle East. Across regional media in the Middle East, what we observe is, or what we focus on usually is the youth engagement, the innovative digital modes of communication, and the emerging forms of political participation, as Mr. Shah. So from my perspective, this attention is for us is quite understandable, because it reflects shared structure characteristics across the young Arab societies and people in the region here. We all trying to understand the youth and their perspective and their hopes for the future. And as I have mentioned, we have here a young population that is becoming more and more engaged into politics. And there is also a sustained interest in understanding how governance systems are adapting and evolving through different societies in different parts of the world. There is also a growing emphasis, I believe, on citizen participation as part of the development outcomes. As we know, in Nepal is a clear example of this kind of situation. So in that sense, the interest in Mr. Shah new leadership in Nepal is not only about drawing comparisons between Nepal and other parts in the region, but it's more about observing how similar dynamics may unfold also in different contexts and different parts of the world. So it's actually I believe this will in future, because we were here busy in the West Asia war at that time, but in future this will bring a more of broader global conversation on how societies respond to changing expectations, and especially when it comes to youth participation and the new mode of communication and their impact on politics and governance. And lastly, as I have mentioned, I'm an Egyptian, so I would like also to focus more on the Egyptian media. So the coverage in Egyptian media, like the main ones that we have is like Al Ahram and Yom El Saba. It was more limited, not like in the Middle East, in the Gulf region. And it was more taken from a contextual and like a broader news rather than a kind of individual coverage. And the focus in Egypt was giving more emphasis on that institutional dynamics and development trajectories in Nepal, and how there is that change and the new youth leadership taking over in Nepal. So here, if I want to say my last words and to conclude my speech, I would say that in Middle East and Egypt, media, they do not approach the leadership of Mr. Shah as a kind of something to judge or to criticize, but it was more presented as a case of evolving leadership and giving opportunities to youth to make them to be listened and to participate in power, and also it's a kind of part of a wider global discussion on governance and development. Looking ahead, what we can take is a measured but genuine sense of optimism about Nepal's trajectory and its future. What is visible is not simply a kind of change in leadership style, but it's more of societal engagement with questions of government's participation and more power to youth and to a responsive governance and political system. So if we can say that Nepal is giving us a meaningful opportunity to think about development and maybe new political leadership systems in the future. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to share my views, and I look forward to hear from my coming fellow panelists. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor. Now I would like to invite Dr. Yael Huet. She is the former Deputy Head of Delegation of the European Union to Nepal. Dr. Yael, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak to this very interesting event. I am a former European official, so therefore I will not be reflecting necessarily the view of my former institution, but as I was able to spend a couple of years in Nepal, I've been following what has happened recently, and I can give you my opinion. In a nutshell, I think for me the key question is whether Balen is simply a populist leader ranting about all elites, or whether he will prove to be a reformer capable of taking Nepal onto the path of sustainable development for all. So in order to answer this question, I would like to look at very briefly the hopes and expectations that Balen premiership raised, as well as some of the difficulties that he's facing. First of all, I would like to stress that what happened in Nepal in the past year has been a lesson in democratic transition for the region and beyond. And I would like to pay tribute to Sushila Karki, who successfully led this transition. And I don't think we would be in the position we're in today without a very decisive action. During my posting in Nepal, I was able to follow the 2022 elections when I visited several polling stations in Kathmandu Valley. And there I noticed the immense frustration that was simmering, and not just among young Nepali people, but I found that a lot of the voters were getting very frustrated with what I can describe as a stratified and ossified political system. However, I mean, it is indeed the younger generation, the so-called Gen Z, that took to the streets to express, not just their frustration, but their despair, and were able to bring about the change. I mean, they were tired of the corruption that forced them to look for poor jobs abroad. They were tired of the nepotism that reserved positions of power for high caste families. They were tired of observing the lavish lifestyle of the same elites when they themselves had nothing. But the last straw, I think, was the ban on social media, was basically a breath of fresh air as far as Nepali Gen Z was concerned. So with 56% of the Nepali population under 30 with no job prospects, I mean, the situation was dynamite. And of course, as Nepal's economy is heavily dependent on the supposedly around 2 million Nepali workers abroad, as 25% of Nepal's GDP depends on those remittances, I think the old elite was not keen to change the system because this is what made, Nepal's economy sustainable. Well, not sustainable, but they was able to keep going. So Balen's appeal, in that context, was very much based on his use of social media. I think that was very appealing for young people. His outspoken style was also very appealing, and so was his Madhesi background. I mean, so far we have not mentioned the fact that that brought the Madhesh region also to the forefront, and all those three elements of use of social media, outspoken style, and his Madheshi background actually spoke to Gen Z. We noticed that, Balen Shah rarely gives news conferences. He uses social media very heavily, and he's got a very large number of followers, which I think, from what I've seen, is like 4 million followers on Facebook. So this is also a very modern way of communicating, especially in Nepal. Also, part of his appeal was that he railed against three big neighbors. We've mentioned so far China and India as the obvious neighbors to Nepal, but let's not forget the US, which is often described as Nepal's sky neighbor. So it was very interesting that he would he would rail against, the three big neighbors as well as the three old parties that had a stranglehold on the country, and this was also very appealing, I find, for the Gen Z. But his style and his narcissistic personality that were definitely part of the appeal might ultimately play against him. So let's recall, for example, that in the past, Balen has expressed admiration for dictators such as Adolf Hitler, which is not a reassuring model, especially as seen from Europe. And as the mayor of Kathmandu, Balen often acted first and figured out the procedural niceties later. He also had a tendency to reserve power for a small group of aides around him. So it's obvious to me that Balen Shah was able to encapsulate young people's frustrations, but the main question now is whether he will be able to implement the necessary responses. It's quite easy to lead contestation of a system or even lead the opposition. It's a lot harder to exercise power democratically and to take a country on a path of reform and development. So we need to look at the RSP's political program. And here I want to flag that having a political program in Nepal is also a good sign and a sign of progress, because in the past, for example, in the 2022 elections, I noticed that many political parties or candidates did not seem to have a program at all. But, people were voting for people rather than programs. So having a political program is important because it provides a benchmark for assessing delivery. So Nepal's new leadership has a very ambitious program with its 100-point agenda that addresses the key issues that were raised by Gen Z. It's a program of job creation. We're talking about the creation of 1.2 million jobs. It's a program to promote health, in the country, as well as the development of a fully digital government that should bring, Nepal solidly in the 21st century. it also promises a 7% GDP growth and turning Nepal into a $100 billion economy within 5 years. So obviously that's a very ambitious program, especially for an economy that is relatively closed. And I'm not sure that it will be possible for Balen's government to deliver quickly enough. And at least not in the next 5 years, and that could lead to more frustration on the part of his electorate. In order to deliver on his electoral program, he will also need to be surrounded by competent people, and that was another electoral promise to select candidates, to select ministers, based on expertise. I mean, this has been partially fulfilled. We've seen, for example, the appointment of a new finance minister who is a former World Bank economist, and that was a good sign. But on the other hand, the appointment of Gurung, no experience in internal security, was also a worrying element. So there, it's a very balanced fulfillment of that promise. So the success of Balen Shah's government will depend also largely on whether Parliament can fulfill its role. The fact that it's got such a large majority might be useful. On the other hand, it might lead to temptation to actually bulldoze his way through. I mean, his style, Balen Shah's style, is very much that of a bull in a china shop, and I think this comfortable majority in Parliament might actually comfort him to continue with this style, unless Parliament can fulfill its role. So the fact that nearly 10% of lawmakers are now 30 or younger, I think would be helpful in recalling the reason why the RSP and Balen Shah were elected. And another positive sign is the fact that a third of ministers are actually women. And as we know, Nepali women are also longing for change. So I will now conclude by saying that the stakes are obviously very high for the Balen government. For the sake of Nepal, I hope that Balen will be able to deliver on his program and to take the country forward in the desired direction, provided that he follows the democratic path. The current international situation will obviously generate difficulties, and it might be impossible for the RSP to pursue a non-aligned foreign policy focused on development diplomacy. Quite clearly, the Balen Shah's government will have to continue to perform a rather fine balancing act in between the main actors. And I hope that beyond the three big neighbors that I've mentioned, Nepal will continue to look at the European Union for support, especially as the EU still remains the main aid donor to this day. So I thank you for your attention, and thank you again for inviting me.
Thank you, Doctor. Now I would like to move on to our next speaker. I'd like to invite Lucas Meyer. He's a senior program officer at the German Southeast Asian Center of Excellence based in Bangkok, Thailand. Lucas is also a visiting fellow at NICE. So Lucas, please move ahead with your remarks.
Thank you very much, and to especially Dr. Pramod for the very kind invitation. Much appreciated. I also have to start with a very brief disclaimer, meaning while our center is or emerged from an initiative that was directly funded from the German federal government, I'm not speaking on behalf of the German government. Instead, what I would like to offer in the following is also a reading based on publicly available policy material and broader German discourse. So Germany approaches Nepal primarily as a development and governance partner, not so much as a geopolitical priority. The engagement is led primarily by the German Federal Foreign Office, which is leading the foreign policy, and the Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development, which oversees the development policy. And because of that, Berlin's core interest in Nepal is developed through stability of the functioning institutions, for example, including things like strengthening the rule of law, reducing corruption, creating economic opportunities, and supporting a stable federal system. Financially, that is reflected in ongoing commitments of roughly 41 million euros, which focus on economic development, health, and energy. And I think it's important to recognize that these engagements are long-term programmatic engagements, which are not tied to individual political actors. I think one note, however, is important to make, and that is that in Germany, the development policy, however, is undergoing increasingly fiscal pressure, particularly in light of the ongoing war of aggression by Russia in Ukraine. And that has led to shifting budgets in Germany, shifting priorities towards defense and support for Ukraine. So Nepal specifically is not targeted by these cuts, but there's a broader trend implicated in that funding is probably likely to become more selective and more competitive in Germany. So with that being said, the developments in Nepal since September 2025 in Germany, or through a German perspective, are generally understood as a significant political unrest that reflected deeper societal dissatisfaction, particularly among younger generations. Berlin understands that these protests were driven by frustration over corruption, economic conditions, and the lack of opportunities. And within that context, the incumbent Prime Minister Balendra Shah is interpreted accordingly, meaning the German discourse tends to portray him as a non-traditional political actor who is associated with younger, urban constituencies and anti-corruption expectations. But I think it's important to note that his political relevance is understood less in terms of that of a consolidated governing power, and more as an expression of societal pressure for change. And I noticed that framing both in Germany's leading media as well as, for example, also in German think tank output, although I would say the overall level of attention remains relatively limited. There are some documents available that analyze the 2026 elections as a significant generational shift. And these then highlighted the rise of reform-oriented actors and the weakening of established political forces. But like I said, broader engagement from major foreign policy institutes based in Germany, I mean, we are based in Bangkok, but based in Germany, the attention remains rather limited, meaning Germans look at Nepal analytically, but not as a strategic priority case. So bottom line, I would say that across both media and expert perspectives, the tone remains rather cautious. The September 2025 protest movement and the subsequent political developments are recognized as a legitimate democratic response. But I think there is limited expectation that this momentum alone will produce durable reforms. And I think with that, I conclude. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lucas. Now we'll move on to our next speaker. We have Dr. Barbara Katuik. She's the head of the Asian Observatory team at CSM Poland. I'm using the abbreviations because I don't want to ruin the pronunciation. So, Dr. Barbara, please go ahead.
Thank you so much. So don't worry, Polish language is horrible to learn. So I completely understand not wanting to break your tongue trying to pronounce it. And of course, again, I will echo my predecessors. Thank you so much for inviting me, for giving me this opportunity to share some of insights from Poland. I'm mostly going to be talking first. I want to talk a little bit about the attitude of the government. I'm not affiliated with the government in any way. I mostly work at the university and at the think tank, so I'm just kind of an observer here. And later I want to talk about kind of the general views of how we think, we as a academic community, as the analysts in Poland think this will function. So basically, when it comes to Poland, a lot of it I think has already been said. So I'm going to be very brief, not to repeat myself with what others said. So basically, Poland under our current Prime Minister, Mr. Donald Tusk, is actually quite happy with the change, because of course the government has been a little apprehensive about the Russia-China nexus that we've had, and the way it has been impacting European security. And of course, with the previous government, the Nepali government being quite pro-China and a little bit pro-Russia, this has not been very well received in Poland for obvious reasons. So instead, basically, Mr. Tusk has said very clearly that he appreciates and the fact that there is a growing support for democracy and democratic norms and the freedom of Nepali people. And of course, Poland has indicated, kind of echoing the larger EU sentiment in many ways, that this is a great opportunity for maybe increased cooperation with Nepal as well, to improve economic stability and just larger cooperation. This is especially important because many EU states are now engaging more closely in what we call the Indo-Pacific region. This is in the EU strategy, this is in the NATO strategy. And of course, Poland has been trying to increase its visibility in both South Asia and East Asia for a couple of years now. This is all the more important, what's happening in Nepal, because of very strong ties between the two countries. So first of all, there is a very big, very quickly also growing minority of Nepali people in Poland. So this is very, very important for us to maintain this kind of a very stable, very good relationship with the Nepali government. There is also an increasing number of Nepali students in Poland. So this is also another area where this is very important. There is also kind of a humanitarian legacy, so to speak. Poland was one of the very few countries that were allowed very early on to help after the earthquake of 2015. And of course, this provides, I think, also a lot of goodwill, even with the new, completely, in many ways, untested government. So, because this is, again, echoing some of my predecessors, this is a big worry. So on one hand, there is a lot of, maybe not joy, but satisfaction that there is a certain end of the deadlock, that the new government has been established with a clear majority and can move forward. On the other hand, this is a government that has been largely untested. We're not sure how the program can proceed. We're not sure how much of an agency, how much of actually completing this program is going to be there. So while there is a satisfaction that this mandate is there is still a little bit of apprehension how long the stability will last. Of course, there is hope because there is a lot of because of that very clear majority. So very clearly, kind of there is, on one hand, when it comes to more analysts, so there are questions about the economic targets, and in kind of when it comes to Nepal, of course, achieving this, I believe, $100 billion GDP by 2031. That's very, very ambitious, and there is a lot of skepticism whether it's actually possible, because that would require a lot of balancing between China and also improving the fraud relations with India. And this pragmatic neutrality, this is a very tight trope. Of course, many Asian states do it, but it's not an easy policy, especially it's not an easy policy to conduct for a very young and largely in a government that is largely inexperienced when it comes to foreign policy. Because if so far the highest office was of a mayor of Kathmandu, that's not really enough here. But Poland is still kind of looking at this quite pragmatically. The government thinks that this is still a great opportunity to increase the trade, especially since Poland has been focusing on green transformation and digitalization, things that Nepal is also very interested in. So there is a strong connection there. Of course, there are still worries that despite the fact that this Gen Z generation has led to a huge breakthrough, this spark might go out very quickly if there are no results very, very quickly. Because there is, of course, what we often call like a half a year honeymoon period with new governments, and this is about to come to an end. So we will have to see how much can this government really do. Basically, I think this is where Poland is at. On one hand, it's kind of very satisfied that there is a growing democratic engagement, that there is a growing more strong democratic government in Nepal, that there is this huge engagement of the Gen Z. On the other hand, there is still the question of how long will this period last, and how fast can this government learn to govern effectively and to have an effective foreign policy, which sandwich between China and India cannot be easy. So I'm going to slowly stop here so that we have more time for perhaps questions and other speakers. Just kind of and I'm going to stop by reiterating that on one hand there is this economic check that might prove the most problematic for the young government, because this is, I think, their biggest challenge and also the biggest promise they have so far. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Doctor, for the remarks. Now we'll move to Dr. Amna Khan. She is an independent researcher based in Pakistan. Dr. Khan, please go ahead with your remarks.
Hi, hello. Can you hear me?
Yes.
First of all, thank you so much for inviting me and having me here for this wonderful event. And congratulations to the people of Nepal for this peaceful transition of democracy. And we are very much hopeful towards the new government that the things will go positively for the people of Nepal. So talking about the Pakistani perspective, first I would like to clear that I'm working independently and I'm not connected to the official government. So my point of views are just mine only. So talking about the Pakistani media portrayal of Nepal's election and Gen Z movement. So talking about that, Pakistani media coverage of Nepal has generally been limited and episodic. However, when Nepal's Gen Z movement gained momentum, Pakistani outlets and commentators mostly framed it as a youth-driven democratic awakening. The focus was on frustration over unemployment, corruption, governance failure, and the demand for political renewal. So many in Pakistan saw parallel situation and parallel with the broader regional trends where younger generations are asking for accountability and merit-based politics. Since in Pakistan, we are also facing the similar issues. And honestly, when this thing happened, it seemed like a ray of hope for the people of Pakistan as well. But anyways, after the elections, the tone shifted towards curiosity and cautious optimism, especially because Nepal appeared to produce a peaceful democratic transition through the ballot box. At the public level, Pakistanis generally hold positive feeling towards Nepal, and Nepal is often seen as a friendly, peaceful, culturally rich country with independent foreign policy traditions. There is no deep public hostility or strategic rivalry between these two states. Therefore, there is a sense of peace and friendly attitude towards Nepal. So, among policymakers, Nepal is viewed through primarily three lenses. Number one, SAARC partner. As a SAARC partner, Pakistan sees Nepal as an important South Asian country that can help revive regional cooperation through SAARC. Secondly, a balancing state, because Nepal's ability to maintain relations with India, China, and other is very much widely respected in Pakistan. Thirdly, a reform case study. If Nepal's new leadership can deliver governance reforms, digital modernization, and youth inclusion as they have promised, that would attract positive attention in Pakistan as well. Overall, Pakistan likely views the current government pragmatically, not ideologically, but based on whether it brings stability, economic openness, and regional engagement. So it's very important that how this government will go forward and what outcomes and results it will provide. So given all this, there are 5 suggestions I would like to make for the Nepal government and for how to re-energize a bilateral diplomacy and relations between these two countries. First, re-energize bilateral diplomacy, which means that hold regular foreign office consultations, parliamentary exchanges, and business forums between Nepal and Pakistan. Number 2, expand education links, people-to-people contacts and cultural exchanges. I really is a firm belief of people-to-people exchange and cultural people-to-people contacts and cultural exchanges. I think like if we improve more, if we provide more scholarships and we have more partnerships with think tanks and universities, and we will do more student exchanges, it will really help us maintain better relations between the two states. And there should be promotion in tourism so that we can build long-term goodwill relations. Number 3, trade realism. Even if the trade volumes remain modest, Nepal can identify niche sectors for like tea, herbs, handicrafts, hydropower expertise, IT services, and tourism packages. So, and I think these days now many people in South Asia are very much interested in exploring the neighborhood South Asian countries. So it will be a great opportunity for Pakistan and Nepali people as well to explore each other's country. But unfortunately, we don't have any direct flights. So I think we should work on that area as well. Since like recently we have started the direct flights with Bangladesh, and now a lot of Bangladeshi people and Pakistani people are going to each other's country, and a lot of Pakistani brands have been launched in Bangladesh as well. So I think we can follow the similar footprints, and with this, I hope that we can really improve the bilateral relations. Number 4, smart international communication. Nepal, I believe that Nepal should tell its story more effectively. The democratic transition, youth leadership, green energy potential, tourism recovery, digital innovation, and inclusive governance. It should be smartly be told in international community. And 5th, regional bridge building. Nepal can position itself as constructive, neutral voice in South Asia, supporting connectivity, climate cooperation, and SAARC revitalization. So I think really Nepal can play a very important role in connecting the South Asia and can be a bridge for all the South Asian region, South Asian countries. And coming towards the Prime Minister's Balansha era, how it is perceived in Pakistan, among politically aware Pakistanis, he is considered as a symbol of generational change, a young outsider challenging traditional elites that naturally attracts interest because many Pakistanis also debate on political renewal, youth participation, and anti-status quo politics. And his background as a technocratic and unconventional leader may appeal to urban youth and reform-minded observers. At the same time, policymakers and serious analysts would reserve judgment until results are visible. We are waiting for the outcomes of economic management, institution building, foreign policy maturity, and governance delivery. As you know, that in South Asia, charisma gets attention, but performance really earns the credibility. So, in sum, this leadership is likely viewed in Pakistan with interest, curiosity, and cautious optimism. And we are very much hopeful that things will turn positive for the people of Nepal, and it will somehow will be very good for the betterment of the whole region. So I think that Nepal today has an opportunity larger than one election. If its new leadership combines youthful energy with institutional seriousness, it can become an inspiring model for democratic renewal in South Asia. And Pakistan would definitely welcome it, and Pakistan would definitely see it as a modern model for Pakistan as well, for Pakistani governance and for Pakistani democratic transition as well. So we are very much hopeful towards the prosperity of Nepal and prosperity of South Asia. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Khan, for your remarks. Now I would like to invite Fawzan Sharif. He is an international affairs expert from the Maldives. Ms. Fawzan Sharif, are you here?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, please go ahead.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to be part of this important discussion. I'm speaking from the Maldives, a small island developing state in the Indian Ocean. While our countries differ in geography and scale, we share many common realities as developing nations, particularly the importance of governance, public trust, and sustainable development. Today, I'll be briefly sharing how balanced leadership in Nepal is viewed from a Maldivian perspective, focusing on perceptions, hopes, expectations, and concerns. While understanding the context from the Maldives, leadership is in other developing countries is often observed through a practical lens, how effectively leaders respond to public needs, deliver services, and maintain trust. In small states like ours, governance is closely tied to stability, public confidence, and economic resilience. Therefore, leadership transitions or new leadership styles in countries like Nepal naturally draw attention, especially when they represent change or break from traditional politics. About perception of balanced leadership from an external perspective, balanced leadership has been widely recognized as non-traditional and reform-oriented. He is often seen as a leader emerging from outside the conventional political establishment, then someone representing youth engagement and public demand for change, and also a figure associated with accountability, transparency, and direct action. In many developing countries, including the Maldives, such leadership is often viewed with interest and cautious optimism. It reflects a broader global trend where citizens, especially younger populations, are looking for leaders who are more responsive, less bureaucratic, and more result-driven. Additionally, the way this leadership has been discussed in international regional spaces highlight a shift towards citizen-focused governance, something that resonates strongly with small nations like ours. About hopes from a Maldivian perspective, there are several key hopes associated with this kind of leadership. Firstly, there's a hope for stronger accountability in governance. When leaders are seen as directly engaging with public concerns, it builds trust and encourages institutional transparency. Secondly, there's hope for efficient service delivery. In countries like the Maldives, where resources are limited, effective leadership is measured by how quickly and practically issues are addressed. This expectation is often projected into reform-oriented leaders elsewhere. Thirdly, there's hope for inclusive and participatory governance, particularly involving youth. Balanced race is often interpreted as a sign that younger voices can influence leadership outcome. Finally, there is hope that such leadership can contribute to long-term stability and development, especially if reforms are sustained over time. About concerns, at the same time, from an external and neutral standpoint, there are also some neutral concerns. These concerns relate to sustainability of reforms. In many developing country contexts, initial momentum can be strong, but maintaining consistency over time can be challenging due to institutional limitations or political pressures. Another concern is that balance between repudiation and institutional process. While decisive leadership is appreciated, it is also important that reforms are embedded within strong systems to ensure continuity beyond individuals. There's also the broader challenge of managing public expectations. Leaders who symbolize change often face very high expectations, and meet these consistency can be difficult in meeting this consistently can be difficult in complex governance environments. Finally, there is the question of scalability, how leadership approach at a city or local level translates into broader national impact over time. Then about expectations, looking ahead from all this perspective, there are a few key expectations. We expect to see continued emphasis on strengthening institutions, transparent and accountable decision making, and also practical and measurable outcome for citizens. There's also expectation that such leadership can contribute to regional inspiration, showing that alternative leadership pathways are possible in South Asia. Furthermore, there is a potential for knowledge sharing between countries like Nepal and Maldives, particularly in areas such as urban management, governance innovation, and public engagement. In conclusion, from a Maldivian perspective, balanced leadership represents a significant and interesting development in the region. It reflects a shift toward non-traditional leadership, a growing demand for accountability and results, and an opportunity to rethink how governance connects with citizens. While there are both hopes and concerns with the leadership model, what remains most important is the ability to translate vision into sustainable, inclusive, and long-term impact. We look forward to seeing how this leadership evolves and what lessons it may offer to other developing nations, including small island states like Maldives. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. Now I'd like to move on to our next speaker. I would like to invite Don McLean Gill. He is in the Department of International Studies at the La Salle University of Philippines. Hi, Don, can you hear me? Okay, I don't think he's here. We'll move to Dr. George Cook. Dr. George Cook is the founder chairman of Aware Log Asian Institute, Colombo, based in Sri Lanka.
Thank you. Thank you very much to Pramod and to NICE also for putting together a very important discussion at a very early stage, where you're setting the stage, you're setting the tone almost in terms of what is happening and what is unfolding. And we've heard a lot of the views being expressed today. New administrations obviously bring much hope. Coming from Sri Lanka, we know that Nepal took a leaf out of Sri Lanka's book, irrespective of what developments took place anywhere in the world. It was developments in Sri Lanka in 2022 that set the stage for South Asia to wake up. South Asia started waking up only after what was termed the Aragale, or the uprising that took place in our country, in South Asia. And thereafter, we saw a similar situation unfolding in Bangladesh. It also unfolded thereafter in Nepal. So this is where we've seen a pattern, we've seen a trend, we've seen a lot of change that has taken place. But whilst all have sought change, especially if you look at Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, and Nepal, we have received the change as well. We have gotten that change, but it needs to be understood in a much deeper sense. And this is where we need that deep-rooted change. That is what has been longed for and has been sought continuously. When we talk about change, we are talking about change in political leadership. But this is where the political leadership, if you look at it from three angles, if you look at three prisms or three sectors, the first needing the change and having to change are the people. And this is where, when we talk about change in the South Asian context, especially looking at our two countries, Sri Lanka and Nepal, people's mindsets, and this is where changing mindsets is not an easy task and something that can be extremely difficult in terms of achievement. But also looking at probably what is another key sector, and that is change to the bureaucracy. The bureaucracy can remain extremely rigid. The bureaucracy has gotten used to certain patterns, certain trends, certain norms. And as a result, seeing that change is quite difficult. And of course, the third category is where those in the political arena, the political leaders of countries, are very mindful of the need for change, and they have to evolve. We saw that happening in Sri Lanka. We saw that happening in our neighboring countries as well. One of the main reasons for the demand for change, whether it be in Nepal, in Bangladesh, or in Sri Lanka, was the main issue of corruption. This is where corruption was talked about extensively. We saw this in our respective countries, but we also understood that overnight, with an election result, corruption does not end. And this is where much has to be done. There has to be systematic changes that are put into place. This is where people's mindsets, the bureaucracy and their method of operation, as well as those at the highest levels who are involved in policy formulation and implementation, have got to be extremely mindful of the fact that change takes time. It is not possible to have a clean sweep overnight, but this is where in key positions, changes need to be brought about. There could otherwise be sabotage. There could be attempted corruption because of the fact that people are not satisfied. People are not happy with the fact that corruption has been stemmed. That is, those who benefit from such corrupt activities. So this is where understanding how the bureaucracy operates becomes key. And this is where in Nepal right now, for the leadership, very much when it comes to formulation of foreign policy, that would of course remain very much within the realm of Prime Minister Balen and his Foreign Minister Kanal. But beyond that, this is where when it comes to governance, there are deep-seated issues. And for those who are coming in with lesser experience, as we saw in the Sri Lankan context, as we have seen in the Nepalese context, it does not mean it is impossible. It is a task that can be achieved. It is a task that can be undertaken. Results can be seen. But of course, we need to be mindful of the fact that people want to see change overnight. And sometimes they themselves are not willing to bring about that change. But at the same time, the bureaucracy. And this is where we've all heard of that very famous saying about having a few rotten apples in a cart. And if you do not remove those apples, if you do not bring about that kind of change, that is going to spread. And it is going to be a return to what it was much earlier. And this is where, when we look at a good example being our own country, in the Sri Lankan context, we have seen the need for change. We have effected the change, but of course, there are those who are trying to sabotage. That happens. That can be as a result of what is understood to be gentlemanly politics being introduced into a country which has been used to a rather corrupt way of operating. But of course, everyone is not willing to play by those good rules or the rules that are acceptable. There are those who might want to deviate from them. And these are notes of caution for new governments, especially those like what we are seeing in Nepal right now. We saw very recently a minister stepping aside while an investigation is being conducted in Nepal. This is a right step in the right direction. We've seen that same thing happening in the Sri Lankan context. It could have happened a bit earlier, but certainly it has happened, and it is an important step. These are areas in which accountability matters. And this is where we are becoming extremely conscious of the fact that when people are in positions of power, it's not only the perks that they enjoy. The responsibilities, the duties that go with it carry much weight. And in order for a country to see change in an effective manner, it has to be effected, it has to be reiterated, it has to be implemented on a daily basis. This is where we only talk about change sometimes at times of elections, which is very unfortunate. We must be talking about change all the time if we want to see that change, effect that change, bring about that change. This is where we look at short, medium, long-term plans. And this is where, when it comes to policy formulation, it is clearly strategized. A lack of a strategy can render a situation to be extremely unfortunate. And this is where we are very mindful of the fact that when we look at our own change in our neighborhood, change right now in Nepal, this is the will of the people. This is democracy at work. This is where we are epitomizing the very value of democratic standards. We're bringing them to bear. We're really walking the talk. We're not only talking about democracy. And there are certain parts in the world which talk about democracy, but might not be actually walking that talk in the current context. In South Asia, we are seeing that walk taking place. And this is where we have much to share with other parts of the world when it comes to democratic values and democratic standards. But of course, we must be extremely cautious. Democracy is not easy. Democracy can be very difficult. It is the most important, the most accepted form of governance, the most important form of statecraft. But of course, we are very mindful of the fact that there are those who want to grab power, who miss power, who want to return to power, who are going to want to see a resurgence of their own political ideologies, their own ways of thinking, going back sometimes, we could even say, to their corrupt ways. And that is what we must avoid. And that is where all kudos to those who wanted the change, kudos to those who brought about change, but of course, the tough task has started. This is where the task is only beginning at this very moment. In the Sri Lankan context, in 4 months' time, the current government would have completed 2 years. Lots of questions are being asked. A lot has been done, a lot is being done, but a lot more has to be done. In the Nepalese context, you are just starting off on that journey, and there is much hope. We're starry-eyed at the very beginning. Things don't always go the way we sometimes wish they would. But as long as there is a greater degree of emphasis on anti-corruption drives, on sustenance of an economy of a country, promoting prosperity of a country for all, this is where we really need to see that kind of change being effected, being implemented, being brought about within a national context. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for your very uplifting remarks. Now, I'd like to move towards Ambassador Manjeev Singh Puri. Ambassador Puri is the former ambassador to Nepal. Sir, I leave the floor open for you.
Please unmute yourself.
Yeah. Can you hear me, please? Thank you. All
Yes,
clear?
sir.
Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Pramod and Nice, thank you very much for inviting me. I am absolutely honored and absolutely delighted to be here with you. Let me at the outset make it clear that I am speaking in my purely private and personal capacity. I used to be India's ambassador to Nepal, and I have, should I say, friendships, my own understanding of people, the country, and a great deal of good feeling towards Nepal, the people, because that's the good feeling that I've received. So let me not try and go into the theory of all the change and so on. We all know that change has been driven by 2 or 3 factors without going into the specifics of what happened. But fundamentally, Nepal and its tryst with globalization, the younger generation coming to the fore, and in a sense, the previous generation kind of not realizing that, you have to be much more responsive to the people and the young people today. And I don't want to get into real politics of Nepal, which I'm not sure others are very familiar with. But had this not happened in Kathmandu, had these protests and the reaction of the government not happened in Kathmandu, maybe life would have gone on, but let's leave it. Let's leave that aside. In most countries in the world, the capital city matters, and it matters much more. The dominant community matters, and it matters much more. It's not just the number. So, Pramod, I heard many of your colleagues when I first joined. My own colleague, Pankaj Saran, was speaking, and he was speaking from his own perspectives, used to look after India's relations with Nepal. And he made very important points, and I will, stress the same in various ways. I also heard our colleague who used to be part of the EU delegation who spoke about the 3 sort of neighbors, if I may say so, north, south, and the air, as they say, the United States. I want to say something to all of you, which is a little different from what many others. Look, for India, Nepal is not a country on the map with whom we have bilateral cooperation relations, with whom we want all the best. We wish them all the best. Whatever we can do, we will do. No, it isn't that. It is a country not just in our neighborhood, a country with which we are civilizationally linked. It is therefore a country and a society of extreme importance to India. And I believe vice versa. What happens in India is something of critical interest to Nepal. And let me tell you, no matter what people will say, not just the political class and the bureaucracy and the diplomats, but ordinary people are very, very familiar with what is happening in India. And so, therefore, this lens of the civilizational ties and the expectation, the geography, if I may say so, is something which can't be wished away, which is the fact. Let me make a point to you. This is perhaps of a qualitatively different order, even in terms of Nepal's relations with China, and certainly quite different from the relationships which have grown as a result of globalization, geopolitics in the world, etc., with the United States, and I dare say European countries taken together, and of course the interest of all the countries in the South Asian region. Having said all this, let me come to the there is a generational change that has happened in Nepal. Let's accept that. Let's also understand that Mr. Balen Shah is perhaps the first person who has come to power as Prime Minister and his party who were not there during the times of the monarchy at all. All the previous, both the UML as well as the Nepali Congress and the Maoists, are in some senses products of the monarchy, taking on the monarchy, trying to wrest democratic reins from them, etc. That's the product. Here is something which is the product of democracy is there, we know it. And now we want something better for our people. And it's the product of globalization in its fuller sense. 25 to 30% of Nepalese being overseas, the social media revolution, the communication revolution as such, and rising aspirations among people. And of course, people talk in terms of, Western ideas having got into, but why not? Come on, these ideas are there for all of us. They happen across the world, and the Nepalese are as much, at liberty to choose them, go for what they think so, etc. And that's their choice. How do people in India generally look at it, me included? The choice has been exercised by the people of Nepal. After all, let's be clear that they voted in large measure for the RSP to win. They voted for candidates who had come over from other parties. And believe me, had they stood on the symbol of the party with which they remained for all these years, they wouldn't have got elected. So people made a complete and total choice. We want change. We want the young generation. We have identified them with the RSP. Believe me, in India also, we saw this change. We've seen what has happened thereafter. It was a change of a different order in the city of Delhi, where a party of young people, anti-corruption, good governance, these kind of ideas came to the fore. Let me make a point to you. Mr. Balen Shah has proven himself to the people in Nepal as being a clean, good, decent, and focused administrator, and delivered in Kathmandu. I've been there 2 or 3 times. Better roads, better sanitation. People speak that the local government was well. I have no doubt that they will make every effort at what you call good governance. But countries are run with something more than that also. It's policies, it's understanding your geography, it's understanding geopolitics. Little example, the conflict in the Middle East, what it does to oil prices. How does good governance have anything to do with it? Yes, you will have to manage the things, but you'll have to pay the price for it. And that price can mean various other things. If the remittances go down from the Gulf countries, see what it does to Nepal. If there are issues regarding airlines flying in and out from there, the largest number of carriers flying in and out of Kathmandu were Qatar Airways, Emirates, and all the Gulf carriers. What happens to Nepalese connectivity? So, that's the nature of these things. Can you do something about everything? No. But, macroeconomic, macro-political policies become very important. And yes, being a good person is sufficient, is important, very important. But is it sufficient? I'm not sure. Aspirations in Nepal are also very high. Mr. Balen Shah has chosen a very well-known economist to be his finance minister, somebody who's well-versed with the world. But, things are complicated, and they haven't been helped by the recent geopolitical changes in the world. This is something that is important. How do people in India look at it? I think generally speaking, everybody says, look, it's the Nepalese right to choose who will govern. They had certain problems with Mr. Oli, a so-called tilt in the direction of China, which you can understand. We in India feel apprehensive about. We understand that you have a 1,300-kilometer border with China and you have to have good relations with them. But the tilt is something that gets perceived, and that perception makes a difference, because there are these geopolitical issues which Nepal is not unfamiliar with. And I would believe that, playing the game is something that is easier talked about than actually worth doing. So let me leave that aside. What is important from people in India and the perspective of people in India? One, we wish you all the best to the people in Nepal. Good, you've had change in generations. Good people who seem to have proven themselves in local government. Very good. Keep up. What is it that we'd like? We'd like to see that our relations with Nepal go further. As India progresses, if Nepal progresses, believe me, it's a win-win for both. We look at all of this in this way. We hope games vis-a-vis India would become much less the order of the day, for whatever reasons, domestic politics, etc. And seeking cooperation will be the order of the day. Yes, there can be genuine issues that, you don't want it to be a zero. It can't be a zero-sum game. Something with you means the other one feels hurt. No. Try and play this in a way. But remember that with India, Nepal's relationships are not just political. they are geographical, they are civilizational and economic. No matter what you talk about, the fact of the matter is we're not only the largest trading partner. In some senses, geography determines trade, and that's the nature of this contact. If India does well in the next 10, 20 years, believe me, quietly, without raising a noise, without doing anything, Nepalese will benefit out of, because people know. I don't know if many of you know, but largest Nepali communities coming up in India now are in Bangalore and Hyderabad, all in the tech field. We in India don't know that they are Nepalis. The Nepalese don't tell anyone, they don't have to. But how nice. We benefit from each other. And it's the same set of people, the same sets of development. We respect each other, having their own sovereignties, their own ideas, absolutely to be respected, but dip into each other's economic prospects and growth. What a good idea. And I hope that Indian companies in the area of IT, data centers, EVs, new technologies, etc., will continue to look at Nepal as the old companies used to. It's an extension, it's a lovely market, an extension, a market which understands our products and in a sense has need for those products. So what a good opportunity. Politically, look, the Nepal government is new. They've made some statements about being very correct and so on and so forth, perfectly fine. But the reality is, as things move on, is that if you can, please try and have great relations with everyone. But do remember that these relations are, it's not particularly such a great idea that all these relations are what you call on an equal plane. Relations have to be based on, how you perceive things. And it's your perceptions which is important. I don't know if this is the right place for me to quote former prime ministers of Nepal, and it wasn't that they said it only in India. And they said, we desire great relations with everyone, the north, the south, the air, and so on. But, we recognize the relationships that we have with India. And I would say that just as we and our polity here, I believe the foreign secretary will be going to Nepal very soon. The prime minister was among the first to congratulate Prime Minister Balen. All these particular things, in my understanding, add to, saying, we recognize there's change in Nepal, but come on, we understand change. It's happened in India. We are the world's largest democracy. We understand the people's desires. We're there to be partners, to be friends, and more important than anything else, to continue for mutual benefit the long-standing civilizational and geographical links, along with it, the economic links that carry on. Somebody has mentioned this thing about the trade balance. Let me make a little point to you. Once Nepal starts generating hydropower from even this Arun 3 project, which is being done by an Indian company, the kind of additions that would happen to the money flows in terms of sale of hydropower. And if Nepal further develops its hydro potential, the kind of money flows that would take place and what would result in many of these particular things. So look, these things, there's a history to them, but the future may not be in that direction. There are lots of possibilities. Work together. I think there is mutual benefit for both sides. So let me stop and say thank you, Pramod. It was very nice of you to invite me. Deeply appreciate being present.
Thank you, Ambassador, for your valuable insights. Now we'll move on to our next speaker. I would like to invite to the floor Dr. Fernanda Vasquez Vela of the Metropolitan Autonomous University, Mexico. Since we are running out of time, I would like to request our speakers to try to make the remarks shorter. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I hope you you can hear me.
Yes.
My Wi-Fi is kind of unstable, so I apologize for that. I would like to thank the Nepal Institute for International Cooperation and Engagement for organizing this webinar, and in particular to Dr. Pramod Jeswal for the invitation. It has been very enlightening so far. I will examine how the Mexican media has seen the new government in Nepal. For this, I examined and selected various newspaper headlines in Mexico that highlight the points I wish to develop, and I would like to weave in three themes. The first one is about the nature of the bilateral relationship between Nepal and Mexico to help explain limited media coverage about Nepal. The media only covers the major issues, the reporting lacks depth, and there is no follow-up of the news. Generally, this analysis of international news networks are reproduced, and there are few academic specialists in Mexico. Secondly, I will discuss the coverage of the political background in Nepal and how Mexico has seen a period of great political instability, as well as how the Generation Z protests in 2025 were analyzed. Finally, these 2 points will help me to discuss perceptions of the new government and how views of Balendra Shah have shifted from media curiosity and emphasis on the break with traditional politics to ultimately an analysis that speaks of populist technocracy. Diplomatic relations between Nepal and Mexico officially began in 1975. These ties are described as low-intensity diplomacy, but with a high degree of cordiality. Over the years, there has been little trade between the two countries, and the strength of the relationship can be judged by the absence of embassies in both nations. Although our relationship has been one of great respect and cooperation in case of natural disasters, we can see that our exchanges are not representative, and so the media coverage has not been either. This means that the media do not provide in-depth coverage of what is happening in Nepal. This creates a distance and a lack of understanding regarding Nepal, and also there are very small group of specialists in South Asia. This brings me to the second point I wish to raise. The Mexican media focus on the most significant news stories about Nepal, those highlighted by international news agencies. Furthermore, they do not follow up on these stories over time until another high-impact news item emerges. This critical period of instability in Nepal between September 2025 and March 2026 has been highly significant. The national media focus on highlighting the dissatisfaction of Nepalese society with political leaders, and in particular the emergence of protests by the so-called Generation Z following the social and media blackouts. This highlighted the ways in which the government acted towards young people using violence and repression. They showed footage of the social unrest, the fires at Nepal parliament and politician homes, and some media described the fires as a symbolic act of total rejection of the system. They noted the strength of the demonstration, calling the Prime Minister Sharma Oli to resign. It was mainly described as a generation gap and the need for new political leaders to emerge. And also, links were also drawn between young Nepalese and Mexican Generation Z and the use of the One Piece flag in their protest, as in both contexts, the flag from the popular Japanese anime has become a symbol of a generation that is neither left-wing or right-wing, fighting in Nepal and Mexico against corruption and in search of absolute freedom. The article also compares the Nepali Nepo kids with their Mexican counterparts, noting how the outrage in Nepal led to political transformation, but how in Mexico is far from anything similar. Some Mexican media describe the inclusion of youth movements in negotiations to resolve the crisis as an unprecedented exercise in democracy. Several emphasized that it was the support of these young people for Balendra Shah that led him standing as a candidate and winning the election. They assert that it was the young people who won at the ballot box. The explanations given for his rise are digital censorship as the catalyst for the revolution, which engaged younger Nepalese and motivated them to participate politically, endemic corruption and nepotism, and the forced and the forced resignation of Prime Minister Sharma Oli. However, the media in Mexico have failed to provide coverage and analysis, for example, of the transitional justice process. They did not follow up on the interim government led by Sushila Karki, nor did they report on the demands for clarity regarding the victims of 2025 massacres. The media went from portraying Balen as a political curiosity, a rapper turned into prime minister, who sparked a revolution with his lyrics against corruption. Later, he was portrayed as the embodiment of radical change and a commitment to a new form of politics, distance from the leaders associated with instability and corruption. This position draws parallels with various political outsiders, such as Zelensky in Ukraine or Trump in the United States, whose professions were far removed from politics and who became major figures of transformation in their movement. Analysis suggests that one might think that their professional background positions them as candidates outside the system, seemingly more trustworthy and capable of driving radical policies. But nearly they are not so far removed and often fail to deliver on their promises. Finally, more academic analysis suggests that Balen's profile should be understood as a form of populist technocracy, that is, a hybrid model in which political leaders use populist narratives to claim that they represent the true will of the people, whilst delegating key decisions to technical experts and digital networks. It is noted that the mobilization they carry out is short-lived, unlike traditional political parties, which build more stable border bases. The challenge for figures such as Balen is to consolidate support for the party they lead over time, fulfill campaigns' promises, and go beyond media propaganda. What is undeniable in Balen's case is that he has so far lived up the expectations for the young people who voted for him, and the electorate has high hopes for far-reaching change. Only time will tell us what results he delivered. So far, two of his collaborators have resigned and been implicated in acts of corruption, and he has not retained them in government, which the Mexican press sees as a sign of political consistency. So I will leave my participation there, and I would like to thank for the invitation and the organization. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am, for your remarks from. So now I would like to invite Dr. Patricio Carmodi from, he's an international relations expert from the Argentina. Dr. Patricio.
Hello, and thank you for the invitation. Just want to, I'm an expert in foreign affairs, but interesting, I was in Nepal for a year last year, so I was in the middle of the revolution. So, and I wrote many articles for key Argentinian newspapers like La Nación and Clarín, and also reported for CNN and local channels. No, so this is of course my point of view. However, I've been always in contact with the Argentine embassy. As you know, our relations with the Nepal are managed through the embassy in Delhi. The first thing is, of course, for us, you know, the revolution was an example not only to Argentina but also to the whole world, and particularly for the politicians. So it was a strong sign. The idea of buildings burning, public buildings burning, was very impressive. And the second thing is the fact that the transition did happen. No, was Sushila Karki, the first woman as prime minister. The fact that that took place in peace was also a great lesson. No, from Argentina, Valencia is of course the rapper, but he is also the mayor of Kathmandu. And what is important for us is that he's a disruptive leader, but he's a moderate. He's not an exaggeration like some leaders we happen to have in our area. No, in general, many disruptive leaders today are quite aggressive, quite communicative, And this is not the case of Balen, so that is an interesting thing. We don't know a lot about, or people don't know about a lot about his engineering background. That should be a plus, but that is going to appear through his management. The second thing is the courage he has, and the fact that he went to Japan instead of being elected in Kathmandu and beating their former Prime Minister Oli. That was quite impressive for everybody here. And then, of course, what happens is, everybody's a little bit worried about the colossal challenges he faces, no, and the great expectations he has set for himself, or that Nepal has set for him. The idea of improving the public administration, dealing with corruption, things that we face here. Corruption was a big issue in the campaign of our new president, President Milei. So fighting corruption is always a theme of importance for us, and how to do it also, of course. The idea of improving economic development. We have not progressed a lot in the last 10 years, so that is of relevance. Infrastructure. Very important, and of course the opportunity for young people. That is something that was very distressful when I was there in Nepal. So how this government manages that, given the support they have received for the young generation, is of course something we look with great expectation. Once the government has started the idea of 100-point reform agenda, that is something political parties here had in last election, so people are quite interested in that, in particular the political class. How anti-corruption is going to be led against the frictions or all the kind of gates the current politicians are going to build. That's going to be very interesting to see. Also, the idea of working and changing bureaucracies within this idea of a tsunami of hope. That is something that people relate to. And then looking at practical things like longer hours for public offices or faster service. That is something that people are interested in seeing how that works. No, the fact that of diminishing ministries, that is something our government here did. So that is also seen as how this is going to work out. That is of major interest around here. And then the fact that he's working with a non-nonsense approach, working from the Prime Minister's office instead of the residence. That is also seen very well. And of course, the whole idea of how is the anti-corruption methodology going to work. That is something we will follow quite closely. Finally, if Nepal is a yam between two boulders, how is the yam going to manage these two boulders? In times of great geopolitical tensions, it's going to be very interesting to see who executes that in a young government, who's going to be designated to deal with that, which is rather complex, even for Polish senior officials. And then very smart to end, the way in which the idea of bringing the diaspora, the Nepalese diaspora, into play, and how the foreign affairs minister or the economic ministers are going to make that work. So from far away, this revolution made a great impact here. It was one of the most, even there were other in Asia, this was the most remarkable. And the issue is recovering from 2 days of chaos. How after this peaceful transition, how is this going to finally work out, and what can we learn from that? Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for your remarks. Now, I'd like to invite our next speaker, Dr. Darko Trifunovic. He is the founder and director for Institute for National and International Security, INIS, Serbia. Dr. Darko. Dr. Darko, can you hear me?
Can we hear? Yes.
Yes, Dr. Darko.
Can we hear each other?
Yes. Please
Yes,
go ahead. Remarks.
Yes. So perfect. I'm here with you. So I'm very happy to be today with you. And our perception from Serbia about Balen Shah new government is extremely positive because we see this as a new step forward for the people of Nepal. And we really hope that the tradition and a new approach will actually be consumed with Mr. Balen government. We understand that he did a lot of good things as a mayor of Kathmandu, and that he also brings the new energy in Asia. And Nepal, of course, it should not be the true, but it is perception that it was a dead end street. Now we are seeing Nepal with the new government as a crossroad, because many civilizations that surround Nepal, many fruit and many good things coming from all this civilization will actually, we sincerely hope, will be presented through Mr. Balen government to the rest of the world. From an external perspective, Shah generally viewed through constructive and cautiously optimist lens. International observers tend to interpret his rise not merely as a domestic political development, but a part of the wider democratic evolution in which citizens seek more responsive and transparent and result-oriented governments. So we are very keen to see and very optimistic to see now the new energy in Nepal. The electoral success is therefore often seen as reflecting as a shift in the public expectation, particularly in urban environments, with the government challenger must be visible and immediate for the people of Nepal. In terms of leadership style, Shah is recognized for his emphasis of efficiency, visibility, and direct engagement with the citizens, which is highly, of course, respectable and highly valuable. And we could see this in election that people are seeing, and they want to understand that Nepal is going forward, as I said from the beginning, combining tradition, values, combining what Nepal is with the new innovation, with the new challenges, and of course, new vision toward the youngest people in Nepal, and we are very happy about that. At the same time, international perspective remain measured and analytical. There is an understanding that municipal leadership operates within the complex institutional framework, and that the long-term impact harnessed not only to translating initial moments into sustainable and clear, visible policy outcome. In this regard, Shah is often seen as being an formative phase democratic potential while navigating the practical realities of government. It's very important, and in diplomatic and international analytical circles, Shah is not yet regarded as a figure with direct geopolitical influence. However, his rule is acknowledged within the context of urban governments, democratic innovation, and public sector reform. Under his leadership, Kathmandu is occasionally cited as a case studies of how non-traditional leaders approach, of course, the new craft of the governments and the challenge that the new governments will face on. In conclusion, the external perception of Balen Shah is positive, with a forward-looking outlook. He is seen as a credible and emerging actor in municipal leaderships whose future, of course, is tailored with his action in reality. Regardless of the long-term outcome, his tenure already contributes to a broader international discussion on government's leadership and, of course, role of cities and shaping, of course, political change. We are very keen and we are very happy to see his government supporting the young people and, of course, understanding needs of all, let's say, traditionally oriented people. We don't want this, that some kind of the new things in Nepal neglect traditions that we foreigners are very proud to see proudly people of Nepal, that they are their heritage and their historical rule in many important moments. So without any further ado, I hope that I express our views, very enthusiastic views on very enthusiastic my presentation, and my sincere gratitude to people of Nepal and highest respect to Mr. Balen, balanced by himself and new government. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor Darko. It was a pleasure to hear from you. Now we'll move towards Liana Darbinyan. She is an international relations expert from Armenia.
Hello, everyone.
Hi.
Thank you for the invitation for this webinar and the opportunity to speak from our country's perspective. Although the current process in Nepal reminds much on the similar scenario in Armenia in 2018, it's not much spoken in Armenian media about Balen Shah's government. Meanwhile, we get this information from media such as Bloomberg and Reuters. When we look at neighboring countries' media, we could notice it was much spoken in Russian media, such as RIA Novosti, TASS, and Kommersant, in the context of regional implications in South Asia, public dissatisfaction and protests, the shift away from traditional political elites, rise of non-traditional political movements, India versus China competition. I can compare elections in Nepal with elections in Armenia, which followed the Velvet Revolution that were similar to Gen Z revolution. It started when traditional parties showed public frustration with the old political system. Similarly, it was a long process and included protests in all the regions and universities in Armenia and diaspora. And finally, a young journalist, ex-political prisoner Nikol Pashinyan, was elected as the Prime Minister of Armenia. From my point of view, when I look back since 2018, in short, the government has developed Armenia more towards democracy, peace, and it fought much against corruption. I am glad now to see many young politicians in Nepal that are technologically savvy and are able to develop better trade. Surely they will be able to spread artificial intelligence and digital modernization, control corruption, and have political openness. I really hope that in the near future, Nepal will do better in politics and economy. I believe that we can see that news in Nepal will gradually become more about democracy rather than on Marxism and communism. Wishing the Balen Shah's government well. Thank you very much for your time.
So I think we have come to the end of the session. I thank you all our speakers for their time and the audience for your participation. This discussion will be very helpful for us, scholars, researchers, policymakers, experts, and even hopefully the new government of Nepal. So I would like to end our session here and thank you everyone for your participation. We look forward to your fruitful participation in the near future as well. Thank you.